Welcome, Notre Dame fans, to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I am Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll. And it's Friday. Might as well be a bullseye, baby. And it's free-for-all Mailbag Friday. And I'll say it again. I say it every week. This is my favorite day of the week. And I'm ready to get rolling. Sorry we didn't have a show yesterday. Brian was feeling a little bit under the weather. And,
if you think I sound bad now, you should have seen me yet, heard me yesterday.
Right. Absolutely. And I had zero faith in myself to do a solo show. So I need my partner in crime. He props me up. So I definitely needed Brian. But he's back, and he's going to muscle through our Friday free-for-all mailbag. So he's doing that for you guys.
I'm just going to apologize in advance. I sound terrible. I'm going to be pumping, drinking a lot of tea.
Right.
I told my wife I wanted to get the Irish Breakdown mug today. She said, no bueno. She gave me this big old giant mug because she said I need more tea than what comes in those 15-ounce things. I'm going to be popping cough drops the whole show to survive. But as the greatest line in movie history,
yes.
Rule number 76, no excuses, play like a champion. So I'm here today. The only reason I can use yesterday is why I didn't do it yesterday, because I wasn't supposed to be on the show yesterday.
Yeah.
So
that's true.
Yeah.
We had a whole plan in place. We had a whole plan in place, and everything just kind of went by the wayside. So
I thought about either just telling everybody I was not feeling well or lying and saying at the age of 43 I finally went through puberty and my voice has changed.
Congratulations.
But then I wouldn't have known how to walk that back in a couple days when I'm feeling better. So let's get rolling. Let's do it. I'm here.
Let's do it, man.
Rock and roll.
All right.
Look, yesterday was Vince not doing a show yesterday. I was like, look, Tyrone Biggums. I was like, I missed my people, man. I missed my family. Absolutely. So let's hit this thing. Let's get this thing rocking and rolling.
Well, we're going to jump right into the deep end with recruiting. So
let's do
AJ's leading us off here. He says, if Anderson and Ayomanor, I don't know if that's how you say it, but both commit before Merriweather or CJ Williams, does ND only take one of Merriweather Williams? If it is yes, that would be disappointing.
I don't know the answer to that, AJ, but what I would say is if Notre Dame did that, that would be bad recruiting strategy.
Absolutely.
That would be a situation where, and I don't know if they're doing this. I'm just talking about both options.
Hypothesizing,
here.
Yeah.
Right. To me, I'm going to tell you what I don't want to happen and what I hope is going on, okay? What I hope doesn't happen is that the staff is just kind of panicking a little bit, not sure if they're going to be able to get CJ or Tobias together. And they're basically saying, look, we got to, sort of take, can't count, we got to take advantage of the kids that we know want to come.
Sure.
So you take those two guys, and then hopefully you can get Tobias or CJ to fill the class out. The other option that I'm hoping is happening is what we've seen on defense, which is you expand the board, you get as many kids as possible that, kids that have some ability as possible. You recruit the whole board. That's what I've said for years, right? So I can't criticize them for having Nicholas Anderson and Ayomanor on the board, because this is what I've been saying for years you have to do. You have to have good options in case you miss out on your top targets, right? And so when you look at these guys and you say, if you miss out on Tobias and CJ Anderson, these two kids would be pretty good fallback options, right? Like not top of the line guys, but good football players.
Sure.
And so I think there's a scenario in which you look at that and you say, okay, that would be an ideal situation. That would tell me that the offensive staff is recruiting the board like the defensive staff is. That's a positive. If they take more than one of these guys, if you take one of these guys, you can just say, hey, look, they think that kid's better than I think that kid is. And they think Maureen Walker's better than I think he is. They may think Nicholas Anderson's better than I think he is. It is what it is. But if you take both of them, it tells me that it's a panic move.
Yeah.
And instead of being patient and letting the board play out, and so that's what I would do. What I would do is I would say, hey, look, CJ and Tobias are must-gets. Okay. I mean, what I honestly hope that they do is that they take those two guys and they go after Xavier Bradshaw, who's going to be visiting next weekend.
Yeah.
Which totally threw a wrench in our show the other night. I'm doing the show on linebackers and safeties, and then bam, Mike Singer from Blue and Gold Illustrated breaks that Xavier's visiting next weekend.
Which is huge. Huge news.
The chat room blew up. Everybody went crazy. Hopefully that means that Notre Dame is going to be patient and let this thing play out, because, again, he's the difference maker in this class. And I don't mean that he's the only difference maker. I mean, he's the unique. He is the difference maker, meaning in style of play. I think Tobias Merriweather is my number one receiver on the board, right? I mean, that's and
you've been very public about
as much as I like Xavier, it's not a discussion of who the best individual receiver, regardless of position, fit, need, anything else is. It is definitely Tobias. Xavion and CJ are that next group, right? But the difference is Xavion brings a completely different skill set that they don't have a lot of on the roster. And the players they do have on the roster that play that way are mainly in one class. And a lot of those guys are going to, some of those guys could be gone. They're on the top
end. I mean, they're going to be leaving or leaving
they
very
could
soon.
be gone in 2022, depending on one or two things happening. A, they break out and they're like, hey, look, I'm healthy. I had a great big season. I'm going to the NFL. Or B, Avery Davis will be gone. Or B, they don't do any better, and you say we can't keep holding roster spots for guys who aren't producing.
Sure.
So you have to, there's the need there is because of the Jay Brunell transfer, which became the third receiver transfer this offseason that wasn't expected. Okay, we expected Micah Jones to transfer. He was graduating. He wasn't in the plans.
Right.
Everybody knew it, and good for Micah. Micah is an awesome kid, right? I'm happy for him. I think he'll do well at Illinois State. But the other three weren't necessarily expected. Kendall Abdul-Rahman, Jordan Johnson, and Jay Brunell. So you've now opened up, I think, now the fourth spot. Jordan Johnson, I don't think necessarily opened up an extra spot per se. I think that Jay Brunell on top of those did open up an extra spot. So I do think they can comfortably go to 4 without having to take away from another position.
Makes a lot of sense to me. And I'm very happy that Bradshaw is going to be on campus because we were nervous about the fact that they really weren't recruiting him.
Right. They weren't pushing for him. Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
and what
they
that
offered
said,
him and all that.
Well, of course, but it wasn't.
He was clearly wasn't a priority for a while. And I don't know if that's changed. Just because he's on campus doesn't mean that that's changed. He could be what we said these other kids could be, which is just if we don't get so and so and so and so, that could be it. But here's the big wrinkle in this whole thing. If they don't necessarily love where they stand at safety, could they start looking at Amorian Walker as a DB? Because that's where his offers are coming from now.
Right.
Bama offered him as a DB. Michigan offered him as a DB. You can say, hey, look, we don't love the safety board per se. We'd rather move him more in there. And, you can say, hey, look, the fourth receiver that we're looking at is better than whoever the number 2 safety would be after Xavier Nawamaka or Jake Pope or whatever. Just some things that I'm throwing out there that could potentially be options depending on how things go.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Next question from Tony is very interesting, Brian. He says, Brian and Vince, I love your guys' takes. Very insightful, extremely knowledgeable. Thank you, Tony. How did you guys go from coaching to covering the team? Would you consider going back to coaching? If you want to take a second, I'll jump on this one first.
Give me a little rest.
I'm going to give you a little bit of rest.
Appreciate that.
Try to
team
go back
player right there. Team player.
To go back and forth there a little bit. I got into covering the team back in 2004 because I won a radio contest. And so then I started doing the pregame show on a local station here. That was what I won. If anybody remembers the Dream Job competition that was on ESPN a long time ago on TV, they did a local one, and the prize was to be the co-host of the pregame show on U93, if anybody's local. And so I won that with my buddy, who became my buddy, Sean Stiers, and that got me into it in the first place. And then actually writing about the team on a website. It was Brian is the first guy I worked with back 2-3 jobs ago, Brian.
Man, you're talking about with Mike, right?
With
Mike Frank at Irish Sports Daily.
That's where you and I met. And so that was a while back. But that's when I started actually kind of covering the team as opposed to just doing like a pregame show, because those two things are wildly different.
And you were still coaching at the time, right?
Oh, absolutely. I was still coaching. And so those two things were not mutually exclusive. I was coaching and covering the team, the whole thing. I would watch game film while in the press box, like game film of my team while in the press box, like waiting for the games to start, like things like that. But now for me, I got out of coaching football-wise because my son is entering high school and he doesn't play football. He's a soccer player. And I kind of made the decision that I wanted to be able to watch him. And so coaching football and watching my son, those two things can't really happen at the same time because I would have been coaching at a different school. And so I decided I want to watch my kid. And I actually got an offer to coach last week at a local high school. And I said, I really can't do it. My kid's only going to be in high school one time, and I want to follow him. I want to be there. I want to be dad. So in the future, could I go back to coaching? Potentially. But I love what
I'm going to go back to coaching. I know you well enough to know that you're going to.
Well, I love what I do here. I love what I do with Brian, and I love watching my kid. And so, not in the near future. And coaching baseball in the spring definitely scratches the itch a little bit. But yeah, coaching football was a pretty special. I did it for 15 years. It was a pretty special time for me. So, but yeah, not in the near future. I want to be dad, and I want to do this with Brian. I love what we're doing here, and coaching football would definitely detract from being able to do this as much.
Yeah.
So, I really enjoy doing this. So. I'm coasting at this point. I love what I'm doing. So Brian is going to have a completely different answer, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, I got into coaching the first time in 2005. Went through a little personal tragedy that I don't care to get into, but it kind of sent my life in a different direction. Was actually attending seminary in Denver, Colorado. Denver Seminary in Colorado was going to get into youth ministry. Can you imagine that? Me doing campus ministry. And
I know you well enough. I could see that.
Okay.
I'm just saying.
Most people that my public persona would surprise a lot of people. But in all seriousness, I was doing that. I had just gotten married, and I was looking for something. This is actually right before I got married. Before I went to seminary, actually, I was a youth pastor in Ohio, and I was just missing the game. And I had been a member of Mike Frank's site for a little bit. This is back a long time ago when, the Irish Eyes days. I had known Mike since I was in college.
Yeah.
And, he asked me if I wanted to do some film breakdown of the 2007 class. That was the Jimmy Clausen class. And I did it, and it was very well received. And then he started asking if I wanted to do film breakdowns of the players, and I started doing it. And then it led to doing these play-by-play breakdowns of the games. Vince, you remember those? Where I would literally break down every play. I would go through each play, and I'd break down what like all 11 dudes did on the play, and it was real technical. And I had a guy who was a doctor in New York. He told me he printed them off after every game, and they were like 30-some pages long. I thought that was awesome. But and then that just led to an opportunity where I was literally a project away from graduating seminary, but I just didn't really feel like my heart wasn't necessarily in it at the time. And I got an opportunity to Mike offered me a job to go work full time. I prayed about it and talked about it with my wife. We came out and visited the area. My wife wasn't super thrilled about the area because she was born in Long Island and grew up in San Diego, and then we lived in Denver. So, Mishawaka, South Bend area was not fun for her. So we were here for 2 seasons. And then with the help of a friend of mine who's in the coaching business, and he helped me get back into coaching. So I got a chance to coach for 2 years in 2012 and 2013. I still joke with him. He actually coaches at a Power 5 school. But I said, it's your fault that I missed Ireland and Norman, Oklahoma in the national title game. And I think you did it on purpose. I think you did it to mess with me. But so I did that for 2 years because I still had the itch, and I got it out of my system. It's like that. It's like the final Rocky Balboa movie, right? Like I fed the beast, and I'm retired now. And it was different because I wasn't married the first go round as a coach. So I could be gone all the time. I could be in the middle of the dinner and a recruit would call and I'd pick up the phone and deal with it. It's a whole lot different animal when you're married.
No doubt.
And my wife was a great coach's wife. I mean, I'd have all the receivers over. I mean, we'd have 12, 15 kids over the house. I still have some pictures of it, Vince. I have to show you sometime. But my wife, and I mean, I'm making like 30 grand a year, right? That's it. And my wife has got like this big giant spread for the kids. And the first time was funny because she's like, they're wide receivers. They're all kind of skinny and all this. So she's like, this will be enough food. Half the kids weren't through the line when we ran out of food. So she's like running out to the freezer, grabbing stuff out of the freezer out in the garage and throwing extra stuff together and like heating up the lasagna that we had frozen or whatever. And she took care of it, but they loved her. And they always, you'd always have kids from hey, can we come over? I'm like, sorry, buddy, this is only for the receivers, But it was hard on her, and it was hard on our marriage, to be honest with you, because I'm not the kind of person that can just, I'm an all-in kind of guy. It kind of took over my life, and I wasn't capable of balancing the two things because of how often I was on the road and on the office. So I decided to get out of it, and there's other reasons why just coaching isn't as fun as it used to be, because it stopped being about the kids and the game and all that kind of stuff. And I don't need to get into that. But so then I went back to covering the team, and then got a chance to go work at Blue and Gold Illustrated. Got a chance to work with Lou Emoji for a few years, which was an absolute blast. Brought you on in 2019 And then I left after the second game of the year to start my own site. And that was ultimately always the goal, was to kind of start my own site, to run my own site. And, it's one of those things where it's like, hey, if you think there's a right way to do something, then go do it yourself. And that's what I did. And it's the hours are just as long as coaching, but the difference is right now I'm in my basement. So when the show's over, I'm going to go have lunch with my wife, and it just allows me to spend a lot more time with her, even though I work a lot of hours because I'm working out of the house. I'm not on the road recruiting. I mean,
right.
And at the Division III, Division II, 1AA level, I mean, when you're on the road recruiting, you're not just gone for a week, and you fly there and you're gone a couple of days. I mean, you're on the road for months at a time. I mean, just the whole spring we're on the road, or we're hosting 100 kids on a weekend and things like that. And it was tough. So I fed the beast. I have really no desire to get back into coaching. I enjoy what I'm doing. This is a ton of fun. It's very rewarding. And at the end of the day, I like to joke, is when, the best part of doing this as opposed to coaching is when Notre Dame loses, nobody's trying to fire me. So that's one of the best parts about it.
And I've joked with Brian in the past, like, if one of my maybe dream aspirations, maybe down the road, is become an athletic director, that if I ever got an AD job, I'd be coming after him to be my head coach. So, I
don't think your school would pay me enough money to do that.
No, that's a guarantee. That's a guarantee. It's a high school. So, but I mean, we're coaches at heart. There's no question about it. That's why we put what we do into Irish Breakdown, and I think that's why you guys get it. And you guys enjoy what we do because we come at it from a coach's angle.
Yeah.
Not just
and we try not to lose that in what we do. And that's
right.
ultimately what I think makes Irish Breakdown different.
Yes.
Is we want to be willing to give you meat and potatoes. I can write a million fluff articles a day and get way more page views than we get. But that's not what that does. At the end of the day, I want to be able to put my head on the pillow and feel good about the work I put in.
Absolutely.
But Vince, how many times I've heard people say, like, I enjoy the game so much more now because of you guys.
Because they understand it. That's
ultimately what we want to do.
Game. Yeah.
Yeah. We want to help people. So when you are criticizing the coaches, you're doing it from a place of knowledge and understanding, and you can win. This is my favorite one. Man, I've won so many arguments at parties because of you. I've gotten that probably 20 times. I'll just regurgitate what you said, and he's like, "Yeah, I hope you don't mind." I'm like, "I don't mind as long as you get that W, man. That's all that matters. Get that dub."
Oh, that's fantastic.
But I mean, that's ultimately what I want to do. Is we had one of our listeners who's posted on the show said he lost his father recently, which is heartbreaking. I mean, my father's still alive. I'm so blessed to be able to have my dad. But he said that his dad was a big fan of our show, and that stuff means the world to me. That we can bring joy to people's life, whether it's for 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours. It's people say, why do your show so long? Because people are still listening. If they weren't still listening 2 hours in and asking questions, we wouldn't be doing the show for 2 hours.
100%. Yeah.
And that's the rewarding thing of what we do. Because we're legitimately trying to build a family here, a community here. And that makes it fun. And if we weren't doing that, I would probably have a lot harder time not coaching, to be honest with you.
Oh,
that's why I do this job the way that I do it. Because if I didn't do it this way, then I wouldn't be feeding the beast. And that's why we do it this way.
Yep. Completely agree. So thanks for listening to our long drawn out stories. We appreciate that. You get a little insight into what our lives, our coaching lives at least, are like. But that kind of helps make us who we are, and it's important. We don't want to lose that when we're in here. So thanks for the question, Tony. That was I enjoyed that. Kai says they'll take Merriweather and Williams if that scenario played out because of Walker. So
I imagine that means the positional flexibility of Walker. Correct. I would imagine. I'm not sure.
I would agree. Matt says, how many more years do you honestly think Brian Kelly has left at Notre Dame? Do you think he would rather have a, quote, smooth transition of power to a qualified assistant he may currently have on staff? Or do you think he wants to keep pushing for a title and risk getting let go or replaced?
I don't think Brian Kelly really thinks about getting let go or replaced. I don't think as a coach you can worry about that. I think maybe there was a time when he worried about that, but I don't think he worries about that anymore. I think that Brian Kelly would like to have a smooth transition to power. I think that's part of your legacy, right?
Because he would have control over who comes in after him.
At least he'd have a say. I don't know if he'd have control, but he'd have a say.
Some control, yeah, right.
But part of that, too, is you better be winning when you decide you want to step away. Now, the question for me, to Matt's question, the I guess the part of it that I don't know is, would Brian Kelly walk away without a title? Right. That would be my question.
Yeah.
So let's say look, if they win a title, I think he's gone. I think he's going to do a John Elway and a Peyton Manning and just be like,
yep. I agree. Completely agree. Because
and
that cements his legacy.
I mean, as long as he's been here, he should. And then you transition to, because there's nowhere to go but down, right?
Correct. Absolutely.
So, I mean, I could see that. And then he'd have no bigger opportunity to dictate who replaces him than the next coach. Having said that, at the end of the day, it really just matters is how when does the fire stop burning hot? Right. That's the question. And that had been my question about Brian Kelly for years. I didn't feel like the fire was burning hot anymore. I thought he's just kind of coasting along. And I still have some of those concerns in some areas, but with what we're hearing about him and what he's doing this offseason from a recruiting standpoint, that's not the actions of a guy who's just mailed it in and just cabin fun coasting. I mean, he's putting in way too much work on a recruiting trail. Now, to be honest with you, in the past, every summer, the reason Notre Dame didn't have full weekends of recruiting visits like other schools is because Brian Kelly was on vacation one of those months. That's a true story.
Yep.
So I thought when I heard that they weren't having a recruiting weekend on the June 4th to 6th, that first weekend, I just assumed it was because Brian Kelly wasn't going to be around. Nope. He was around. He was seeing 23 kids and all that. There was a strategic decision that they didn't do that, which I actually, once it was explained to me, I was like, yeah, that's really smart. And just another example of the staff is really thinking this thing through big time. And I thought the reason behind it was either Kelly, but when I heard Kelly was gone or was in town, I thought the reason behind it was something else. And then it was explained to me. I was like, man, that's really savvy. Like I think that's thoughtful planning. And so I've been really impressed by that. So I do think Brian Kelly realizes how close the program is. Mm-hmm. And I think when he watches what happened against Clemson in 2018 and against Bama this year, he realizes like that gap is nowhere nearly as big as it was in 2012. Not even close.
Right.
And, we're a couple players here and there away. And I think he senses that. And I think that reinvigorated him, which is why I think he was so pissed off after the national title thing when people were, asking. And they were fine questions. There's nothing wrong with the questions. And I was annoyed with how Brian Kelly went about answering those questions. We did a show on that. Mm-hmm. But I think that comes from a place of frustration knowing that they're closer. Mm-hmm. I think if he knew, like, man, we're so far away, I don't think he would have reacted with the same vigor that he did to those questions. And then to follow up with, a week later, he's doing what he's doing to get Marcus Freeman. Then you talk about all the recruiting he's doing. So I think he's that fire's at least been reignited a little bit in Brian Kelly, I think.
Yeah.
Now, does he want to step away before that fire's out? That's the question. Even if they win, that's the question. If you win and you're like, hey, man, I still got something left. Kind of like John Elway did his first Super Bowl. Because remember, John Elway didn't walk away after the first Super Bowl. Right, John Elway walked away after the second Super Bowl.
Sure.
So is Brian Kelly going to be kind of a Peyton Manning type where he wins that one? Now, it wasn't Peyton's only Super Bowl win, but it was his one in Denver.
Yeah.
And then kind of walk away, or does he kind of go with Elway?
Like the first one, he was in the prime of his career. Yeah, I mean.
Right. Well, I'm talking about like the one with the Broncos. It was a little different situation, but it was one title and he walked away.
Sure.
Even though Denver was going to have a pretty good team coming back the next year. And then you look at it and you say, is that Brian Kelly, or is he going to be kind of like John Elway? We're like, you know what? I still got a little something left in the tank. We got a good operation going here. Sure. Let's just say Notre Dame does what you and I think that they can do, which is, if things break the right way, they could win a title this year. Does Brian Kelly walk away, or does he say, I don't know if Marcus or Tommy are necessarily ready yet, and I really like the team we're going to have coming back next year. Let's make another run at this thing. Yeah. If the fire's still there, then he may keep doing it, But when I say win a title, I'm more thinking like 2-3 years down the road they win a title. That's more of what I'm thinking. It changes a little bit if that title's 2021.
I agree.
I think he's going to be like, no, I'm just starting to have fun with this.
Yeah, I agree. Because I think with the added push that he's put it into recruiting, I mean, look, you're not going to see the fruits of that labor right away. I mean, yes, you'll see it from a team recruiting standpoint and all that stuff, but from an on the field standpoint, overall, you're not going to see the fruits of this class's labor for another couple of years. And so I just feel like the amount of work that he's putting in right now, it's not for, and I'm not saying they're not going to be good this year. I'm just saying you have to kind of see that
recruiting work isn't for the 2021 season, because
that's exactly right.
Campus. I will say this. I think the other part of it too, Vince, is if that title happens now, is if Brian Kelly is adamant that he wants to have sort of a transition of power, so his legacy goes beyond his tenure, then I don't know if they win it this year, if he would feel that those other two guys are ready. Not even necessarily ready, but would Notre Dame hire them? Tommy Reese is 29 years old. Marcus Freeman's in his first year at Notre Dame.
Yeah, right.
That would be the interesting thing. But, in a couple years,
that's different.
You're in a little better place for one of those two guys.
Sure.
And obviously, especially with Marcus Freeman, because he's older, he's been a coach for much longer, and I think much, much closer to being the head coach kind of person.
Absolutely.
And he's got more of the personality for it.
Right. We got I got to find it now because I just clicked on it. Oh, there we go. John's got a super chat. Thanks, John.
Thank you a lot, John. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no doubt. He goes, glad to catch the show live today. Wanted to super chat to thank you for this week's great breakdowns. Here's my question. What are the differences between spring and summer camps? Who are you looking to take the next step?
Well, spring is more of a real, I don't say real football. It's more of an organized football
practice,
thing.
Though.
You've got pads on, you're going through those type of things. Much more coach-led than anything else. The summer workouts are more about drills and agilities and explosive. I mean, you're really building up your body. There's a lot of more strength conditioning. And then a lot of the drill work is all of it is led by the strength staff.
Right.
A lot of the drill work, a lot of the football-specific stuff is going to be player-led. So it's about Jack Cohn and Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine.
So they have like
Brendan
7-on-7.
Yeah. Hey, guys, let's get together. Yeah. You're coaching guys up. You're coaching each other up. Avery Davis is coaching up, Lorenzo Stiles and Xavier Watts. And hopefully Joe Wilkins is coaching up like Deion Colsey and Jane Tom, those kind of things. And that's what's happening at that position. You've got veterans like Jarrett Patterson's working with Joe Alt and those kind. You know what I mean? Like it's more player-led. That is where a lot of your leadership is built, honestly.
Absolutely.
Your leadership is built in two periods, in my opinion. It's built in January to March in the weight room, because that's a conditioning period, but it's more weight room oriented. That's, where your recovery and things. But then also after spring in that summer period is where your leadership, because that's where the accountability really comes into place. Because during the spring, accountability is to your coaches.
Absolutely.
They schedule the meetings. They schedule the practices. There's classes. There's a built-in accountability that I got to go there because otherwise I'm in trouble. In the summer, there's a little bit less of that because you don't have to be somewhere. You say, you know what, man, I was out too late last night. I'm not going to go to this. I mean, you got to go to the workout, right? The strength conditioning workout, but you don't got to go to the additional stuff.
So that's
I don't have to go in the film room today and be with the quarterbacks. Like if I'm a receiver and I was out too late last night or whatever the case may be, or I just don't feel like working out, I go to the mandatory workouts during summer. But if I don't want to go with Jack Cohn to watch film tonight, I don't have to go watch film. So I think that's where you really develop that leadership. But if you're Jack Cohn, you get on the phone, you say, hey man, I don't care. Don't make me have to drive over there. Right.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that's what it boils down to. But that's where leadership is built.
Yep.
And that's where that account. Because look, I don't care how dedicated you are. There's going to be days you're going to wake up and say, I just don't feel it today.
Yep.
But the great ones are the ones that push past it, and the accountability to your teammates is, to me, are ultimately what is where you get that true camaraderie. It's not showing up because coach is going to bench me if I don't show up, but it's, hey, I'm going to show up today because I don't want to let my guys down. And that's where you really build that unity of a team, in my opinion, is over the summer. Because
I agree more.
The summer is also the most grueling part of the strength conditioning program. Not only is the work harder because you're gearing up for the season, but it's harder work in 90-degree weather.
They push you.
Right.
There's no question. Yeah.
Right.
And because they're not going to push you like that during the season, because that's just detrimental to games. And it's just, that's not when you put the work in. The work is put in the off season. There's no question about that. And I actually had a very similar conversation with a couple of my rising seniors on my baseball team. I was like, we had a summer workout. There were some certain guys that weren't there, might've been at the beach. And I said, hey guys, I'll be here next year. I'll be here the year after that. Peer pressure will get guys here. I can ask them to come all they want. Peer pressure will get guys here. And that's really what it is. I mean, it's their program, and it's the same idea when you get to college, So
can I speak on that, Vince?
Yeah, absolutely.
How lame are you if you miss a workout to go to a beach in Indiana or Michigan? Like, I understand if you're from Florida. Or
the only beach these guys understand is Lake Michigan. I mean,
that's what I'm talking about. Like, how lame are you to be missing practice to go to a beach in Indiana? Like, come on, man. Like, that's just – you're not serious. And Felix Fournier also gave us a chat, buddy. I really appreciate that, Felix.
Yes,
Felix,
sir.
I believe, is one of our Canadian family members here, and one of our Canadian brethren. So he asked the other day – he was the one that asked the other day about the Canadian wide receiver. So he said they know how to evaluate hockey up a little bit more up there than they do here. So
That's fair.
Yeah, thanks for being with us today, Felix, and thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, Michael has a comment here. He goes, "Hey guys, so you think we have a real shot at landing? Is that Emil Wagner?
Wagner, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if we do, how good do you think he is?"
I think he's first of all, no, I don't think they have much of a shot at landing him. I think he's the guy that Ohio State wants. And if Ohio State wants him, they're going to kids from that school go to Ohio State if Ohio State wants him. That would be a huge upset. But he's a really talented kid. Look, he's long, he's athletic, he's got some punch in his hands.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of talent. My only concern is he's not real big, meaning weight wise, and he's kind of got a skinny core and lower half. And so I worry about whether or not he's going to be able to put on the weight to get up to 295, 300 pounds and maintain that explosiveness. That's a bit of a concern for me. But if he does, he's a good football player. I mean, he's a top 200 caliber player for sure. And if he's able to add that weight, then that jumps it up even more. So he's a very high ceiling player to me, no question. And if Notre Dame were able to get him, that'd be a good pickup. But there's just a little bit. He's got a very high ceiling, one of the 4 or 5 higher ceilings of offensive linemen on the board. My concern, however, is he probably has one of the lower floors of guys on the board too. And so that would be my one red flag. But he's going to be going to Ohio State, in my opinion. I'll be shocked if he doesn't end up at Ohio State.
All right, sorry, I was doing a little research there.
Okay.
This next question is
actually, we got to go ahead. Go ahead.
I didn't see that. I apologize. Let me go to that first. We got a super chat down here from Jacob. Thanks, Jacob. He says, was watching all your videos this week while on vacation. That's dedication, man.
He also ordered some merch while on vacation. So that's what I'm talking about.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
It says, went for bike rides on the beach listening to IB. Thanks, guys. Wow. Well, thanks for taking us along. I wish I could have been there with you. I would not argue with a little bit of beach time right about now. I don't know about you, Brian.
Yeah, I'm. You know what, man? I lived in Virginia Beach for a while. I'm beached out. And I lived in Jacksonville, Florida, for a little bit, so I'm beached out. I was never a beach guy anyway, man. I'm Irish, so I don't tan. I burn.
Well, beach time for me right now involves like taking all the crap for the kids and stuff, and so I hate.
Dude, I live in Indiana. There's no such thing as beach time here. I know you all have convinced yourself that going up to the shore of a big lake is beach time, but sorry,
got,
dude,
man.
That's
all we got. It's all we got. DJ, and this is what I was trying to do a little bit of research. DJ says CBS Sports Ben Karcheval has an article rating the 2021 quarterbacks by tier. He has Cone in tier 3, number 9 overall. Wondering what the IB guys think of that. And I was only doing research because I wanted to see who was ranked ahead and what those tiers were. Preseason, I could see this. I really could, because there's a lot of question marks out there about Mr. Cone and what he's going to be at Notre Dame. Brian and I are very high on what he brings to the table, and I think he could very easily go up that chart. Now, he's not a guy. He is not a Trevor Lawrence where you're going to put the whole team on his shoulders and go. So maybe like a tier 2, depending on who the guys are.
This is a garbage article, by the way. I'm reading it now.
Well,
this is horse manure. I was
going to say maybe you put him in like a tier 2. I could see that for sure, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to win you a game.
There's 5 guys in tier 1, and Vince and I disagree on Jack Cone. We have for a while. I guess I just view winning a game for you differently, and to me, it's almost as if like getting the ball where it's supposed to go all the time is not a bad thing.
Yeah, right.
It's like, he didn't win the game. He threw it to so and so. I'm like, he completed 70% of his passes and got guys the ball where it needed to go. That's like saying Mac Jones doesn't win you a game. Well, he had great, but he's got to get the ball where it's supposed to go, right? Like that. It's like being a game manager has almost become like an insult, right? That's winning you games. It's like Joe Montana didn't play the game the way John Elway did. But the way Joe Montana played it worked pretty good too.
Yeah, he won a couple Super Bowls.
Yeah. But to me, I'm looking at this article. They have 5 guys that were in tier 1. They have Dylan Gabriel from UCF as the number 3 quarterback in the country, and Grayson McCall, number 4 from Coastal Carolina.
Wow.
Then they have tier 2, and there's 10 guys in tier 2. And I'm looking at some of these, and I can't help but kind of laugh. And then I get down to tier 3.
Oh, so he's not number 9
No,
overall.
He's number 9 of tier 3.
Wow.
So he looks like 24th, which is better than what some of the other articles. But like they have Dorian Thompson-Robinson from UCLA ahead of him. They have Malik Cunningham from Louisville ahead of him. Drew Plitt from Ball State ahead of him. Just Charlie Brewer from Utah ahead of him, the guy that was at Baylor. I mean, just some of this stuff is just hilarious. They have Phil Dracovic behind Anthony Brown from Oregon. You know Anthony Brown, the guy that transferred from Boston College because he wasn't getting it done at Boston College. Couldn't stay healthy. They have him ahead of Phil Dracovic. So just some of this stuff. The guy that Anthony Brown who didn't even start at Oregon last year. So yeah, this is a poor article. I think that's way too low for Jack Cohn, in my opinion. I mean,
yeah, well, I agree with that. I thought he was number 9 overall.
Somebody read some. I can't remember who. Maybe it was Pete Sampson wrote it, but it wasn't Pete Sampson's quote. It's Pete Sampson quoting someone said it. But there was some Big Ten coach, assistant coach, was quoted as ripping Jack Cohn. He's just a guy basically, and he talked about he completes 70% of his passes from a clean pocket, but when he gets pressure, he was down near 50, as if like that's some kind of insult, right? And so I looked at the Pro Football Focus numbers against pressure, and he completed 53.1% of his throws, right? Well, so the guy was accurate, right? But do you know what Trevor Lawrence's completion rate was this past year? Or let's start with Notre Dame. Do you know what Notre Dame's completion rate, Ian Book's completion rate was this year when it comes to
being under
passing under pressure? Right. So I'm pulling up the number now. It was 49.5%. Right. Okay. So below Jack Cohn, which is actually one of the better numbers. Ian Book, if you look at 2019, the same rate, Ian Book was at 38.5%. Okay. So, and one of the things is Notre Dame did a lot more short passing this year. So let's go ahead and look at old Trevor Lawrence, right? I think we would all agree that Trevor Lawrence is a pretty good quarterback, correct?
I would agree, yes.
Okay, so Trevor Lawrence's completion rate against pressure this year was 40.6. 40.6%. Remember, Jack Cohn is 53.1. So this guy saying Jack Cohn at 50% was somehow this horrible, awful thing, right? Who was that other guy that played in the postseason this year? There's a high draft pick from Ohio State. What was that kid's name? Justin Fields, right? I'm joking sarcastically.
Okay, I was like
41.7% completion rate. 41.7. Okay. And then he had a much better year the year before, and he was at 53.5, which is exactly right where Jack Cohn was. Let's look at Trey Lance in 2019 when he led his team to a national championship. Okay. That year, let's go Trey Lance 2019. At the FCS level, Trey Lance was at 43.6 in 2019. Okay. Zach Wilson, right, while playing the kid from BYU, right? So Zach Wilson, while playing against a bad schedule this past year, completed 48.4% of his throws against pressure. Right. So the 53.1 is looking pretty flipping good right now, isn't it?
Well, and that's the thing. You can take a stat and you can make it say whatever you want for an article. Right. You know what I mean?
And you're assuming that people aren't going to know any better.
And most wouldn't. That's the thing. Most wouldn't know any better. And so that they're going to take that article and they're going to say, well, he was 20 points lower when he's under pressure. Yeah. Okay. He's 20 points lower or 17 points lower. That's to be somewhat expected. Right. So I'm high on the fact that I think he's going to do very well this year. And I think he's going to be a guy that people are talking about. Right. I really do. So we got another super chat, Brian, I got to throw up. Alex, he says, gap closers play sick. Nice job sticking it out today, Brian. Any news on any upcoming commitments? Thanks, right. Alex. Appreciate it, sir.
I'm definitely playing sick today. There's no question about it. But we're here, baby. We're doing it.
That's right.
Any news on upcoming commitments? I mean, Alex, you know me. That's not my style to kind of give that away. All I'm going to say is, Junior Nawamaka is going to be announcing his decision tomorrow. He has made that public. If I was a Notre Dame fan, I would definitely be paying attention to Twitter, looking for him to make his commitment. And then I would be looking for probably a couple articles from Irish Breakdown to be posted around that same time, like seconds after.
I was going to say, you'd be like,
yeah, I'm a really fast typer. I expect Jalen Snead to make his decision somewhat soon. I'm still trying to hammer down the day. It's Notre Dame and Oregon. Again, I feel really good about it. Look, look, these are these kids' moments, right? But just
exactly
look at what's happening. Look at who's not coming to Notre Dame this weekend, right? Look at the 2 visitors whose visits were canceled, Sebastian Cheeks and Nakai Martinez, and just kind of start drawing some lines, okay, to what that means. But here's the thing y'all have to understand about Notre Dame. Notre Dame, we've said this before, they do not push kids to commit while on visits. They just don't. That's not
It's
really
not their
what
style.
they do.
Right.
Number 2 is usually the kids that are willing to commit on a visit or have either already been committed for a while, or the other case is it's a kid that maybe isn't necessarily a gap closer.
Sure.
Because Anthony Lucas is going to want time to decide. Cyrus Moss is going to want time to decide. Xavier Nawamaka is going to want time to decide. Jalen Snead is going to want time to decide. So, I mean, again, the guys that are that you really want are the ones you may have to wait on a little bit, and that's good.
That's
okay. A good thing.
Yeah, that's okay.
Usually it's the guys where Notre Dame is the best offer are like, yeah, I'll commit right this second. Like, you can't, hey, we'd like to offer. And it's like before you can finish the sentence, like, yes, I'm coming.
Yes,
right?
I'm here. Yeah,
right. That's usually not the difference maker. That's usually because you're the biggest offer on that kid's board.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah. Where do I sign?
So, look, I think last weekend went great. They had 9 kids on campus last weekend, and Jalen Snead visited on Monday. Of the uncommitted players, of which there were 10, I still feel really good about saying I think they'll get at least 7 of them. I still feel good about that.
I like that number.
Obviously, Jake Taylor is not in the mix, but look, they're going to be in the mix for every single one of those kids that was on campus this weekend. And this weekend we'll have to find out. I mean, if they say, hey, Nicholas Anderson, we definitely want you in this class, or A.O. Manor, we definitely want you in this class. Could I see those kids committing soon?
Yes,
I could. I hope that that's not necessarily going to happen.
Right,
but I could see that happening soon.
Yeah.
Nicholas Singleton's going to need time. Dallin Hayden's going to need time, who was on campus last weekend. Cyrus Moss is going to need time. Xavier Nawamaka is going to need time. Carson Hinsman's not going to probably make a decision soon. I think Joe Bruner has another visit coming up. I mean, Carson Hinsman has a Bama visit coming up. So I don't see a lot of these guys committing soon, but Notre Dame knows that. Notre Dame's prepared for that. They're not necessarily pushing for that. Right. What they're trying to do is they're trying to position themselves that whenever this decision is made, we're going to get it.
Yeah.
And especially on defense, there's a confidence that comes with that too, right? Like let's explain that. Like there is an insecurity that comes from trying to force a kid to commit when he's not ready. Because you don't want him visiting other places because you're afraid he may go somewhere else.
Absolutely.
It takes a level of confidence in yourself and your program to say to a kid, no, go on a visit first.
Right.
I'm pretty confident in saying that there were some kids that were ready to commit this past weekend. Notre Dame staff said, yeah, we want you. We're going to take you. But just why don't you go on that visit just to be sure?
Sure.
That it takes some stones to do that. And it takes a great deal of confidence in your operation. And it also takes an understanding of how this has evolved over the years. And those kids that tend to commit during visits sometimes can be the ones you have to worry about most down the road.
Sure. Absolutely.
And so I think it's a good strategy, but it's also takes some stones to be able to say, hey, look, we're confident enough in where we stand, and we want you to be more certain.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing. And then on defense, especially, I mean, most of those are on defense. It's been an impressive thing to see. We haven't seen a top to bottom defensive staff at Notre Dame like this in a very long time from a recruiting operations standpoint.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, but Sean says, any truth to Bradshaw coming on a visit this month?
Yeah. According to Mike Singer, and I believe Tom Loy has confirmed it, we're still efforting doing that. Again, I'm working on building my recruiting staff right now. But I believe Tom Loy, per my conversation yesterday, I believe he's confirmed it as well. So, yeah, he's going to be coming next weekend.
D-Rock, my guy. He says, good afternoon, everyone. My comment, I listened to the Ohio State podcast yesterday. They talked about the Styles brothers. Sonny at camp took his grandmother with him so she could watch. The media overheard Sonny talking how cool it was to see a billboard in Ohio with Lorenzo and ND on it. Media on the show thinks they can get Sonny.
Well, of course, Ohio State people
right.
think that they think they're going to get everyone.
Of course.
Every kid that doesn't go to Ohio State is because the Ohio State staff told him no. That's basically how the Ohio people are.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, look, it's an Ohio State Notre Dame battle right now. I think that there are some schools that can get in the mix. I'm not at the position where I'm ready to predict him to Notre Dame. I think that they're still in a fight with Ohio State.
Sure.
But I like where Notre Dame stands. At the end of the day, it's just Sonny's a different cat. You know, he's a very unique individual, and I mean that in the best possible manner. it's going to be a little bit of a battle, but I think Notre Dame has done everything, and I think they've done a phenomenal job of. I mean, they're not pushing the Lorenzo angle, but it's obviously one that they like. Sure. It's about convincing Sonny, here's why we want you.
Right.
Lorenzo's
That's smart.
Lorenzo.
That's what they should always do with a little brother.
Unless you have a situation where the brothers are a package deal, then
that's different. Yeah.
Right.
Let's see here. A couple comments here, just basically saying stuff we've already kind of talked about a little bit. Jack says, how many of you think Snead and the kid from Cali are going to commit soon? That kid from Cali being junior Nawamaka.
You got it. You did it. I'm so proud of you. You finally got it right.
I appreciate that. But yeah,
faster than I could get the quarterback from Clemson's name correctly.
Yeah, right. Tommy says Junior's announcing tomorrow. You already mentioned that, Brian. Mm-hmm. D-Rock apparently has a lot of time on his hands. He's listening to all kinds of podcasts. He says, I listened to the Oregon podcast a few days ago. Analyst said Cyrus Moss is a must-get. Nothing mentioned about Snead.
Again,
so they may have already given up.
You all got to read look, I'm trying not to. I could easily come out and say they're going to get this guy, but that's not, that's not how we do.
Yeah,
that's not how we do it. But just, I'm trying to get you to follow the signs. Right?
Just hold them up. You're not saying anything. Yeah. We got another super chat I want to throw out from Mike. Thank you, Mike. He goes, thanks you guys for the honest and valuable evaluations. Always try,
Mike.
That's
Mike Padone. Thank you for that, Mike. I appreciate that very much. I love the little emoji, the football and shamrock emoji he's got on there too. That's pretty sweet.
That's well played.
I'm digging that, Mike. I'm digging it.
That is well played. Let's see here.
I got it. I'm
thank you.
Tavis McKay. Did you see Jalen Snead's comments on his rivals interview about Notre Dame and Oregon? What are your thoughts after hearing what he had to say? I did not. I don't pay much attention to rivals. I'm sorry. I just don't. It's nothing personal. It's just got better things to do with my time. But I've talked to a lot of sources on this. I think Notre Dame absolutely knocked his visit out of the park. Everything I've said to you is exact. Look, here's the deal. I've had couple sources that have been saying to me for a month that Jalen Snead it's looking really good for Jalen Snead. After the Oregon visit, some things changed because Oregon they crushed that visit. They are doing some really good things right now in recruiting. And Notre Dame had to equal that. They had to equal or surpass that visit. Sure. And from what I'm told, they absolutely did.
That's awesome.
So we'll see what happens next, but that's going to be Jalen's announcement to make. But if I'm a Notre Dame coach right now, I'm feeling like we're in a pretty good place.
Tyler says, I think Snead is 100% locked in to Notre Dame. So appreciate that. Let's see here.
Trey Taylor. Hey, Trey, good to have you in the show, buddy. Hello to all. It is always a blessing to be able to talk ball with great people. So I appreciate you being a part of the show today. Let's see here. We get some more. Let's see. So Tavis had some comments as far as what Jalen Snead said. He's responding to Kevin. He said he was very impressed with the atmosphere at Notre Dame. Was super interested in following the Notre Dame linebacker tradition. That's not something get enough play, and that's something that I don't think that was part of my frustration with Coach Lee from a recruiting standpoint. And again, I love Clark Lee, and he did 99% of the stuff he did was brilliant, but I just did not love his recruiting, a ton, because you've got this linebacker tradition that nobody else had 2 buckets of winners in the last decade. Notre Dame did. You've had
good point,
and now you've got 3. You've had 3 since 2012. Notre Dame's had 3 buckets of winners.
Yep.
How do you not recruit linebackers at a high level at that point in time?
Right.
And I think that's what Marcus Freeman has done a great job selling that. Like, hey, look, you're next, right? I mean, look, and all 3 of those guys are second-round picks, and you can say it. Look, Jalen would have been a first-round pick, but, if not for the knee injury. Jeremiah was a second-round pick because he's smaller than the guy. He's going to weigh less. He weighed less as a senior at Notre Dame than all 4 of the kids that they're going to sign are going to weigh when they show up at Notre Dame. Yeah. That's the other part of it, So, and then let's see, what was the other thing he said? And he also said Brian Kelly was a legend as well. So, but see, here's the reason he's saying
Brian Kelly was involved.
Yes, but this is why. But more importantly, this is why Brian Kelly should be more involved. Look, we have been critical of Brian Kelly on the show at times when it's warranted. We've also praised him a lot on the show. But here's part of the reason I've wanted him to be more involved. The national perception of Brian Kelly is way different than it is amongst people like me because we follow on a daily basis. We also don't accept the narrative that Notre Dame can't do this, can't do that, the other thing.
Absolutely.
But for Brian Kelly, he's won 3 Coach of the Year awards. He's had Notre Dame playing for a championship 3 times during his tenure. And he's a guy that everybody's trying to interview. When Notre Dame's good, they've got Brian Kelly on every single ESPN, Fox, all those kind of things. And they've been good every year for 4 years. Brian Kelly is the perception amongst recruits is that he's kind of like this big time top 3 or 4 coach. And you need to use that. That doesn't mean Brian Kelly needs to be texting kids every single day. We've talked about that. But when Brian Kelly picks up the phone and makes a phone call, that carries a lot of weight. I mean, that's throwing, that's the big stick right there. Like you're using the big stick. You're throwing around some heavy weight. And that's why he needs to be more involved. And when he is involved, this is what we get.
Exactly.
And look at, there's a lot of things it's kind of like the perfect storm from a recruiting standpoint. You've got 2 playoff appearances in 3 years. You've had 4 straight years of top 10, of 10 plus wins. You hired Marcus Freeman, which was a big hire. You brought in Mike Mickens a year ago before you brought in Marcus Freeman. So it's not like you brought in Mike Mickens with Marcus Freeman like you did Mike Delcone Clark Lee. You went and got Mike Mickens first.
Yeah.
Then you brought in Marcus Freeman. And if anything, having Mike here helped you with the seal the deal with Marcus Freeman. You've got Mike Elson is just crushing it right now at D-line recruiting. He's as confident as he's ever been as a recruiting situation at Notre Dame. Because I also think part of it is because he's got a great product to sell, but also he has some great guys around him, that are really getting after the recruiting trail. And then now Brian Kelly's getting – it's like the perfect storm, which is why you see Notre Dame with the number 3 class. And I did some math yesterday. I believe they'll jump up to number 2 if they were to get both of those linebackers.
Because it's all based on numbers.
Right.
I mean,
but those are high-impact players.
Oh, absolutely.
Jalen Snead's a consensus top 100 kid.
Yes.
Junior Nawamaka is now in like the 120s or something like that. But – I mean, that's why Brian Kelly needs to be more involved. And when he has been, like he is now, look at the results.
Right.
It's really impressive.
Yep.
It's really impressive.
No doubt. Jonathan has a comment about your voice. He says you sound cool. So there you go. Congratulations.
I sound like I got that deeper radio voice. I should be doing I should be that guy on the radio at like 2 o'clock in the morning playing like the smooth jazz and stuff like that. Next we have some smooth jazz coming up, right? We have some John Coltrane coming up next.
Shane says, how does Snead not have a Clemson offer?
It's a great question. Number one, I think here's my guess at it. Number one, they're pretty loaded at linebacker. Mm-hmm. They haven't been offering very many linebackers in this class. And number two, they kind of recruit more pure inside guys because of the way that they play their defense. And I don't know if he necessarily fits what they're looking for. But yeah, to your question, I don't. The other part of it too is they're making kids work for offers. They haven't offered many kids. They're saying, "Hey, come to our camp and earn an offer."
Okay.
Gotcha. If you're Jalen Snead, you're like,
I'm good.
Why?
Right.
Right. Like, okay, Notre Dame has a better package than you do in almost every way, and they already want me. So those are just my guesses at it. I think they're full. I mean, their linebacking core is very young out last year outside of Mike Jones and James Skalski. Very young and very good. So they don't have the same need at linebacker, in my opinion.
Gotcha. I'm just going to put this up there, and we'll just leave it right here. Brian doesn't publicly state any silent commits, but ND totally backed off recruiting Sebastian Cheeks, and I would assume that means they both have silent commits from Snead and Tui Alamaka. So I'm just going to leave that right there, and we're going to move on to the next one. Allison says, I saw Sonny Styles received a crystal ball to Notre Dame. Are predictions this early often right?
Well, they are for if a kid's about to commit.
Yeah.
And I don't think Sonny's necessary. But look, here's the deal. The way that crystal balls work, there's two, from my understanding, it's kind of your points come off of 2 tiers. There's the percentage of just being right and wrong. But my understanding is you get more points if you pick it early. So what guys will do is they'll put a crystal ball early and leave it there until they have reason to change their mind.
Sure.
And then if it ends up being right, then they get more points. It's my understanding of how that works.
Okay,
so,
that makes sense.
I wouldn't put a whole lot of stock into that right now. Is Notre Dame in a good place with Sonny Styles? Yes. Would I rather be where they are or Ohio State is? I'd rather be where Notre Dame is, but it's by like that much.
Right.
And when you're talking with young people, it can change any minute. And that crystal ball, I believe, and again, I don't pay much attention to that stuff, but based on what I was told, because it was in one of these chats that people were talking about when the crystal ball was going in for Sonny Styles. It was before he visited Ohio State. So
that would make sense.
I try not to get too wrapped up into that kind of. When you see like 7, 8 crystal balls going at once, then you kind of know that it's a done deal.
Gotcha.
Which I hate, because then it's kind of like, okay, well, gee, I wonder where that kid's going to go.
Yeah, and thanks for stealing the kid's thunder too.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Trey says, I know you're not an Ole Miss fan, Brian, but you need a hot toddy, if I spelled that right.
I don't know what a hot toddy is. I'm looking it up now. Looks like it's a drink that's going to help me with my throat. Okay.
It is. It's a nice warm.
It's got whiskey.
Soothing.
I don't consume alcohol, so I wouldn't be able to do that. But
it massages.
And my wife makes me a nice black tea with honey, and that's doing. Hey, look, we're 56 minutes in, and I'm still surviving. My throat feels like it's about to fall out of my body, but we're going.
We're moving. Well, if it makes you feel any better, we're at 106 on the questions. So. Michael Collins says, happy Father's Day to Vince. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And he goes, and to Notre Dame for being USC's daddy, which that might be the best quote of the day.
Oh, my gosh. Michael, I'm putting that up on Twitter. I'm putting that up on Twitter. Actually, I'm going to do that right now.
That is fantastic.
I'm putting that up on Twitter. So go ahead and talk for a minute, Vince, because I'm putting that up on Twitter.
Oh, my goodness. That was awesome. All right. John says, I saw the first summer lift was a few days ago. When do the rest of the freshmen arrive on campus for summer and fall? They're there. The freshmen arrived, I want to say last weekend. So like 5-6 days ago, Brian. So the freshmen are there. It was all over social media of them arriving, because the women's basketball freshmen, the men's basketball freshmen, they all arrived. So they're all there taking summer school classes, getting involved with the off-season workouts. So the full team is on campus, and they're competing, and they're doing everything that they need to do. Obviously, it's not a practice setting. It is a lifting and conditioning setting. They're working with the strength coaches, et cetera, while the actual football coaches themselves are recruiting. So
I can't believe you just already passed on from that comment. I
you told me to keep talking, so
but
I kept talking.
Still, I just can't. I can't. That was the most savage thing that's ever been said in this podcast. I literally just tweeted it out, Michael, and I said it was one of our listeners. I didn't take credit for it as much as I wanted to, because that is the most savage thing I've ever heard. Happy Father's Day to Notre Dame for being USC's daddy. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my. Only thing that could have been better is if you would have said Michigan, but I understand why you can't, because of the last time they played. But that would have been the only thing that would have made it better for me. But that was absolutely beautiful.
That's awesome.
That was my favorite quote anyone has ever. And there's been a million great quotes. I mean, I love all of y'all, but I'm sorry that Michael came today. He came correct. Michael came incredibly correct today. He brought savagery to this podcast, and that's incredibly well done, Michael.
That's fantastic.
Incredibly well done.
That is fantastic. Jay jumps in. I don't even know where to go from here. Jay jumps in. He goes, I hope the staff holds off on taking a commitment from wide receiver Ellick before Bradshaw visits. That's hoping Merriweather and Williams are in the fold by then.
Yeah.
Trey asks, is Nawamaka on campus currently?
Yeah. He got in last night, actually. He got in early. The visit started today. The visit started this morning, Trey, but he actually got in town last night. So did Carson Hinsman.
Nice.
A lot of these kids have been getting in town the night before. Now, again, you're on your own dime that first night. I mean, Notre Dame, because once you start doing official things for Notre Dame, that visit starts.
Yeah.
So they're kind of driving in or flying in or whatever the case may be on their own dime. You get a place for a night, and then when the visit starts, you get checked into your place. But yeah, he got on campus last night, and it's good because then you can kind of walk around, you kind of see things on your own, and kind of take a little tour of the community and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it's good. It's good.
Makes sense. Shane says, you may have addressed this, but have your thoughts on Walker changed since the Bama offer?
That would be a more in Walker. No, my thoughts haven't changed. Look, here's the deal, Shane, and this is a great question. I'm not pushing back against your question. I think it's a great question. My opinion on a player is never determined by who's offered him, who's recruiting him, or anything like that. It's always going to be off film.
Yep.
What I did say, however, is that I'm going to give it a second glance when a program like Alabama offers as a DB. And that was the thing for me. If they'd offered as a receiver, it really wouldn't have mattered to me, because that Alabama offers, they offer a lot of kids.
Sure.
But to see him work out at a camp, and then for Nick Saban to offer him as a defensive back, that kind of meant something to me, Because it's not just about the 4-4-1 at that point in time. It tells me he was doing drills and Nick Saban saw something.
Right.
So when I watch his film in the fall, am I going to pay a little bit closer attention to his potential to be a defensive back to see if he's going to grow? Yeah. But the only thing that's going to change my opinion is seeing something different on film that I haven't already seen on film. Right. I've said this before. Look, go watch the NFL. How many times have we seen a guy go to the combine, blow up, and teams overdraft him despite the fact his film does not impress? And how often do those guys actually turn out to be good players? It's rare.
Mm-hmm.
And usually those guys end up because, again, okay, yeah, you look great in shorts, you're really fast, but being fast doesn't make you a football player. Otherwise, James Jett would have been a Hall of Famer, right? I mean, he was an Olympian. I mean, that's my take on it. Is look, the film's got to tell me something, but I will say this: I'm also not so arrogant to think that I don't care if Nick Saban offered a guy. I know more than Nick Saban. No, if Nick Saban offered a guy, it's going to tell me like, you know what, Brian, you need to go back and pay more attention when you see film. Now, I watched this film again the other day, just like was I in a bad mood? At that time of the year, was I And the film tells me the same thing it's always told me. He's got some tools, but he needs a ton of work, and that 4-4-1 that he supposedly ran at the camp doesn't show up on film. He's banged up as a junior. Sophomore film doesn't show it either. So that's all great. They did it at camp. I need to see him do it on film in the fall. Right. Now, am I going to be paying close attention to him in the fall? Yeah. Do I want Amorian Walker to prove me, or not to prove me wrong? Do I want his film to tell me a different story? Heck yeah.
Right.
But I just need to see it. And that's the only thing that's going to change my mind. But it's a very good question. I mean, it's a very good question. But it was also countered by the fact that Jim Harbaugh offered him a couple days later. So it kind of, it counterweights it.
Yeah,
counterweights it a little bit. Sorry. I mean, look, Michael Savage, USC, I got to get a Michigan jab in, right?
Yeah,
I mean, I could just like walk away and be like, I just did a bad show today if I didn't get a Michigan joke in there. After Michael, just the savagery with which Michael just went after
USC, and I love every second of it. Tyler says, Brian didn't hear the Bradshaw info until now. That's huge. Would they take his commitment if he pledged on his visit?
I don't know. I hope so. I mean, I can tell you what I hope happens, but I don't know. I don't think Notre Dame is as high on Xavier Bradshaw as I am. Now, I hope that's changed, but that's just my opinion.
All right. From Jordan, he says, did you see tackle Bear is coming for an official visit? Do you think they're bringing him in because Notre Dame knows they whiffed on Jake Taylor and they're not confident in Zach Rice?
I think that's part of it. I also was told that there's another 2022 lineman. Somebody hit me up before the show started on DM, said that he's hearing that there's another 2022 in-state offensive lineman they might offer. The fact that in mid-June they're scrambling around trying to get a guy like Ryan Baer, who's a nice football player, but not a Notre Dame caliber player. There's a reason Ohio State's not recruiting him. There's, let's be honest. That tells me that they're concerned about their tackle recruiting. Again.
Yep.
Again. Because we were here last year. You got Blake Fisher, and then after that you missed on Milam, Tangwall, Rucci, all those guys, and then you had to go find your plan B guys. And if they can find another Joe Alt type of plan B, that's fine. I'll tell you, this is one thing. There's a 2022 kid that is from the in-state. I'm gonna have to find his name. Let me pull up the text that I got earlier from my buddy. Kid's name is Ashton Craig, and I don't know if he's hearing this from a source or if it's being reported somewhere else. So I'm not claiming that this is information's coming from me. But there's an in-state kid named Ashton Craig that supposedly Notre Dame is looking at that they may offer. 3-star kid, 6'5", 260. There's nothing about him from a recruiting profile that should excite you, but here's what I'll say. Watch the film. Watch the film. Because the offensive line is one position more than any other that I could give zero you-know-whats about what recruiting rankings say.
Absolutely.
We have seen so many 2- and 3-star kids that were 250, 260 pounds as high school players go and be first-round draft picks because that is a position where if players evolving physically and technically and all those kind of things have huge guys. That's a position where you see more guys go from 50-plus pound gains in college and become great players. So, if you can get that kind of guy, I'm going to still hammer you for missing out on the top guys again, but that's a nice plan B, just like Joe Alt was a nice plan B. Look, Joe Alt was a plan B, right? Can we be honest about that? But that doesn't mean he can't be a really good player. It just means he wasn't your ideal guy. If he was, you'd have taken him 3 months before, right? That's okay. It's like with the running back last year. Look, Logan Diggs and Aldrich Estime were plan B guys because they wanted Will Shipley. They put all their eggs in the Will Shipley basket. But plan B doesn't always mean you can't play.
Yeah, right.
Right? Those guys are really good.
Right.
It just means you had to go to your plan B because you missed on your first guy. So the thing is that, again, that's another term. Plan B is kind of taking on this like negative connotation. It just depends on who that plan B guy is. Joe Walt was a plan B guy. I'll take a Joe Walt in my class every year. I've said this before. I'll take a Joe Walt in my class every year. Only on the offensive line. It's not, I don't want a Joe Walt cornerback every year, right? Give me some corners that can come in and play. Offensive line's a different animal, though. And defensive line is a close second. Because you're going to get your Aiden Gaberas and your Darren Aguza who are 220, your Will Schweitzers who are 205, players like that are going to need time to develop. But when they, Adi Takumba Ogundeji is another example. He's like 215 pounds when he graduated high school. Missed most of a senior year with a knee injury, but the tools were there. So I'll be patient with a guy like that.
Right.
Those are two positions where I can live with that. So, yeah, look, they're striking out a tackle right now. So, okay, so what do you do? Right? So what do you do? What's your plan? And if the plan is to go get Ryan Baer, that's going to be concerning. If the plan is to find maybe an Ashton Craig or get on somebody else, then that should be better. The fact of the matter is Notre Dame should not be having these kind of issues recruiting tackles.
Absolutely.
That's the problem.
Correct. Yes.
That's the problem that I have.
I agree. It feels like they're
not closing.
And it just feels like they're scrambling at this point. And I don't like that at all. That
but let's see who they scramble to. That's going to be the question. Right?
Sure.
That's going to be the key.
Well, I'm watching a little bit of his highlights, and he's a big, strong player. There's no doubt about that.
Who's that? Craig?
Yeah.
Oh, he's really athletic too, Vince. Yeah. He's very explosive. Great. Even though he's probably 250 on that film, his hands are like bricks.
Yep.
I mean, he brings some power. He just has to. He's just 250 pounds, right? Like that's the knock. That's the only knock I have on him. He's not a real thick guy.
He looks small, but he's got good feet. I mean, he
really
athletic
player.
When he gets out in space on a kid, that's
yeah. Now you're just teasing people by not showing the film, but yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. Like to me, offensive line, I can live with that.
Yeah.
A buddy just texted me, said that it's Steve Wiltfong is the one who said that he's going to visit Notre Dame. Okay. So that's who it was. So again,
I like that.
Friend of mine that's listening to the show. It didn't come from me. It was not my info, my intel, so to speak. I was told that this was going to happen.
Steve is former Riley coach, by the way. Just throwing that out there.
Gotcha.
Anyway. All right, cool. So I think I know the answer to this one, but I'm going to throw it up there anyway. Jordan says, "Are you doing a weekend recruit visitors review tonight for a second show?" Probably not because of your voice.
Well, it's also the visit won't be over till Sunday.
Good point.
So we're not going to do a preview like we did last time because of my voice. Now I will say this, Jordan. If you go to irishbreakdown.com, I have an article up previewing it because I knew I wasn't going to be able. I said yesterday we might do 2 full shows today. I'm hoping to just survive through this one. Okay, but I'm going to try to save my voice. We're gonna have a podcast Saturday. I'm not sure when. I'm not going to tell you what the topic is, but we're going to have a podcast on Saturday. Just keep an eye out for it. Okay. It'll be sort of a breaking news type of podcast. And then I don't know how else I can say this, man. But anyway, I'm gonna do the review. Probably Monday is when we'll try to do the podcast review.
Sorry,
don't make me laugh, man. It hurts my chest.
Sorry, man. That was just really funny. Okay.
But yeah, but also, so Jordan, so I did a written break preview of the visit at irishbreakdown.com. And I also did like a 25 minute interview last night with Darren Pritchett at WSBT that is on the website. I'm going to put it on the podcast later this afternoon, the Irish Breakdown podcast. If you are a podcast listener, Jordan,
too,
it'll be up there. And I previewed kind of the guys on campus this weekend. And I'm telling you, man, I was so glad that I canceled that I didn't do a podcast yesterday because about 10 minutes into that podcast yesterday, I was like, I just want to tap out. I want to pretend like I've lost.
Long too.
Yeah, and then we went longer than normal. I was like, Darren, you're killing me.
Yeah,
but I thought it was really good. I got a lot of talked a lot about a lot of different things. So check that out too. So those will be the things that we have that we'll preview this weekend, and then we'll be back on Monday and we'll recap it as best we can.
Absolutely. And by the way, Jordan says he wants you to feel better. He says your voice is wrecked. Drink some tea, feel better, my friend.
Somebody posted yesterday on one of the shows. He's like, "Did Brian die?" We usually don't see him not have a show. I'm like, "Well, thanks for the sympathy there, buddy."
Is he dead?
He was annoyed that I didn't do a show. I was like, "I'm sorry. I apologize. I will try never to get sick again."
I'll put this up here, even though you just covered it. He goes, "What are the chances that we land anyone from this weekend?" Well, I guess maybe it wasn't from this weekend, but specifically, I guess the guys visiting this weekend, what are the chances that Notre Dame gets a commitment?
I mean, there's a couple guys on campus that if they want, they'll get. I just think some of the guys that I know that they can get, I don't know if they should be taking them right now. The guys that I really want them to get, that I think they have a shot with Carson Hinsman. I think they have a shot with Nicholas Singleton, although I don't think it's nearly as strong as it used to be. I think he's probably third of the three running backs. He'd probably be third, and as far as where I think Notre Dame's my confidence level, I think Dallin Hayden 1, Gavin Sawchuk 2, and Nicholas Singleton 3 as far as Notre Dame's ability to land them. But they're in the game. It's Notre Dame and Penn State.
Yeah.
And as I've said with every other kid that comes on campus, that may be the case now. By the end of the visit, it may be completely different.
Right, exactly.
Right? And so, let's see how it goes. But Cyrus Moss, I think, have a shot with. I think Xavier Nawamaka, they have an even better shot with in there. Joe Bruner, I think they have a shot with. They just got to close. And a lot of this is just going to determine, Coleman, by how the weekend goes. The guys that I know that before the even visit starts that they can get are not necessarily guys that you want right now, in my opinion.
Yep.
That's just, because again, here's the deal. When you swing for the big fish, right? When you swing for the fences, look, you may have to get a couple swings in. It's not going to happen right away, right? With these recruits. And that's okay. That's part of the deal. That's fine.
Yep.
That's fine. So just
not going to get everybody.
We're not going to get immediate commitments from the best players. Guys you're going to get immediate commitments from are usually guys that you were going to get anyway, and you just, you push for them.
Yep. I got a super chat here, Brian, from Jason. Thank you, sir. Yeah. He says he's got some advice for you. He says, get some NyQuil and get some sleep. Big weekend ahead. And he's not wrong. It's always a big weekend, especially in June. This is big weekend time. You know what? I went back up.
I got one here.
I got cut off. So
I got one here. Okay. Notre Dame 2164. Sorry, I can't participate today, fellas. He's participating. Okay. On my way to Panama City Beach for a much-needed vacation. Vince, that's a real beach, okay? Like not Lake Michigan or the dunes, right? In Michigan City, that's a real beach. So my man is going to a real beach.
Just harsh.
Let's see here. Jordan Schreiber says, are there any other receivers going to be used as pressure to try to secure commitments in Merriweather and CJ Williams? Potentially. But again, that's kind of where Jordan, I like where your head's at here. That's what we're going to find out this weekend.
Right.
If they take commitments from these two players, then it just tells me that no, that's not what it is. It's they're kind of rushing and taking players that honestly a place like Notre Dame shouldn't be taking right now. If we come out of this weekend and neither Anderson or Adam Ayomanor have committed, then maybe there's something to that. But it's not just pressure; it's also making sure that you have good options in case you miss on your top guys. That's the other part of it. But yeah, I don't know if it's immediate pressure. Like you're going to say, hey, if you don't come, we're going to take Nicholas Anderson. Because if I'm Tobias Merriweather and I'm not ready to come out, I'm say, fine, take Nicholas Anderson.
So, yeah, you got to be careful. You got to be careful.
And that's not usually Notre Dame's modus operandi. That's just not usually how they do things. And it's more of a pressure by information. Hey, you know what? We're taking these guys and those guys. The only time that they'll do that is if kids are like if there's guys they want, like there's 3 guys they want. And because here's the deal, you got to be able to call if they call your bluff, you got to be able to say, well, I want a bluff, right? So a linebacker, you can say, hey, look, if you don't come now, we got this other guy that we want to take, and they would have taken that guy, and so that's the reality is you can't play that game of chicken with top players because they can easily call your bluff. You only should do that if you're genuinely ready to move on if they don't come. And I don't think those 2 guys are guys you should genuinely move. You should make that for. Okay. Tommy Leonard says, guys, would you sacrifice not getting one of the top board receivers in order to get Bradshaw? Well, Bradshaw is the top of the board receiver for me.
Right. Yeah.
So, but if you're to say, hey, if you could only get one of Tobias and CJ in order to get Savion Bradshaw, would you do that? Yes, I would. Because here's the thing: I love Tobias Merriweather. I love CJ Williams. We've been talking about CJ Williams for months here.
Yep,
we've been talking about Tobias for months here. Tobias has been number 1 guy on my board since the first time I watched this film, and so. The reason I say yes to that question is because, again, it's not just about getting the highest ranked recruits. It's about building the right kind of receiver core. And to do that, you need a diversity of skill set. And we talked about this the other day on a show. LSU had big guys. Jamar Chase was the small guy at like 6'1.5", 210 pounds, right? Justin Jefferson is 6'4", Terrace Marshall is 6'4", but if you watch them play, they are three distinctly different types of skill players. Justin Ross and T. Higgins are both 6'4" guys, but they play the game completely differently.
Yeah.
The problem at Notre Dame is so many of these guys play the exact same kind of game. That's the difference. Xavier Bradshaw clearly plays a completely different kind of game. So even if you were to say, hey, I think C.J. Williams is a better player than Xavier Bradshaw, okay, that's fine. I wouldn't even necessarily argue with you too much on that. I don't necessarily agree, but it's really close. I love CJ. But to me, the reason Xavier brings value is because he's different. So you get Xavier with one of those two guys, that's the ideal compared to just getting those two guys. Now, the perfect world scenario, since they can get four in this class, is you bring in Xavier and then you just push for those two guys and get those two guys. And that would be but that to me, that's what you got to do to close the gap, right? I mean, it's right here, guys. To close the gap, you got to be able to take some chances. You got to be able to swing for the fences a little bit. And if you miss, then try to go then try to get in the mix for Andre Green, who's going to be a much more down the road guy. Try to flip somebody, but don't take a guy right now that isn't a guy that's going to close the gap. If you're taking a guy right now that doesn't close the gap, it better be in a position where you have serious numbers needs. And I don't think they're there yet for receiver. You have to be able to push for this is the needle moving class. This is the gap closing class. And every position coach needs to be thinking, what can we do to close the gap with this class? And if this guy's not closing the gap, and he's a good player and he's kind of like what we have, he's going to sustain what we've had. The only place that's acceptable is a place where you're already elite. That's tight end. That's offensive line, right? Zach Rice isn't a gap closer. Jake Taylor's not a gap closer. They are gap continuers, right? And to play on the phrase that we're using, you've already created the gap. You are the program.
Yeah.
You, Alabama and Oklahoma, are the programs everybody else is trying to close the gap on.
Sure.
You got to make sure you're recruiting at a level that you don't allow them to do that. But every other position, you need to be thinking about what are we doing to close the gap. And we're seeing it in the D-line. We're seeing it in the linebacker. We're seeing it in the secondary. We're seeing it in the running back. We're seeing it at tight. We got to see it at quarterback and receiver now. That's where we're at.
Absolutely.
Here, can you read these, Vince? If I pop them up, since you're not able to see these, can I pop them up and you read them?
Yep. So Jordan says, what's the latest on Snead that you're hearing? Do you think he's going to choose from Oregon and Notre Dame, or he's waiting to get those bigger offers and bring the big boys into the picture? From what I'm gathering from Brian, it's down to Oregon and Notre Dame is in a great spot.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yep.
Okay.
And I don't think he's going to be waiting for big boys. I think
Right.
He's comfortable with the schools on his list right now. I was a little nervous about that. I mean, part of me is like, what's he doing all these camps for? And is he going to wait? Didn't seem like he was in a rush to make a decision. But he said recently, and my sources have said that he's definitely in the position where he is going to be. He's going to be. And then I got booted, Vince, so I'm out of the questions too. So.
Oh no. Okay. So we'll have to just go with what I've got here. Okay.
If you had a question in that we missed, you guys know we don't skip questions. I got StreamYard gets weird sometimes.
We can only go back so far. And you got kicked out. So JoJo says best Notre Dame info you guys bring it. Look forward to hearing and getting your insight. Wouldn't it be awesome to get an IB bat signal when there's a possible commitment to Notre Dame? I would love that.
I'd have to think about that one. We did that when I had Mason Plummer and Nathan Urbach on staff. They wanted to do something like that, and I eventually gave into it. But
did you?
They did like this Tom Cruise thing from Top Gun where he puts the glasses on or something like that. I kind of get nervous about that because sometimes it's obvious who you're talking about. Like if I were to do that today, it's obvious who I'm talking about. Like, and I'm willing to give more hints in these podcasts because it's a little bit more exclusive crew and but like as far as on Twitter and things like that, it's a little bit more. I'm just not sure how I want to do that, especially on Twitter. But the Notre Dame staff does that kind of stuff too. But let me think about it. And then if we do get the recruiting operation going the way that I'm trying and want to get it going, we may do something like that.
Oh, all right.
But I just feel like that's kind of like clickbaity. That's the thing is like I just feel like that's real clickbaity. And
It's not really our thing.
It's just not my style. I don't have a problem with anybody that does it. I think like Tom Doyd somebody told me he puts like ninjas or something. I don't like some. I was like, hey, look, if that's your thing and that's what people like, man, go for it. It's just for me. It's just it's Everybody's got to do their thing, and Tom's my dude, and I love Tom, but it's just like that's not my style, right? That's just not my style.
I get it.
My wife's giving me my refill of tea right now. I texted her. I said, I'm dying down here. I need some more tea.
Did you really
finish it off? Yeah. So she just came down. She took a break from her work.
Yeah.
Brought me some more tea.
Domer since birth. Great screen name, by the way, or handle, or whatever we call it. Brian, I respect that you don't call for firing of coaches, but regularly talk about the need for Coach Alexander to improve. You've commented on what he needs to fix and focus on plenty, but how does he do it?
Well, I think it's just about getting a better plan. Right. And look, like every coach does this. I mean, if you go look at the best Marcus Freeman, if you go look at what Marcus Freeman is doing now and you compare it to what he was doing in his first year as a position coach, or maybe what he was doing as Purdue and things like that, all coaches evolve. All the coaches change over time. All coaches say, you know what, this worked then, but we're running a different offense now. When you coach in different types of offenses, you have to adapt to those kind of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then when you have some areas where you're struggling, you have to go make adjustments, right? And so as a coach, you look at it and say, okay, why is it that I'm struggling to get young guys able to play here? What's the reason for it? Okay, I got to look in the mirror and I got to figure it out. Okay, then you look over your schedule. Okay, well, here's what we did. Well, you know what, man? But when the season started, I don't know if I ever had Xavier Watson, Jordan Johnson in the office together, just us going over stuff. That's not right. I need to fix that. I need to make sure that I don't do the same thing with Lorenzo and Dion and Jaden. I need to make sure I'm checking in with those guys, making sure making sure staying on top of their academics. And look, that's something where that relationship can be built. Look, Notre Dame's in a great situation where coaches don't have to necessarily stay involved in academics because the academic support is unlike any other place. I mean, Notre Dame's academic support is special and unique. Sure. But I still think it's something where even though somebody else is doing it, you bring them in, hey, how are things going? Just to build that relationship, build that trust, but then also make sure that you're devoting the time that you need to do to spend with them. Maybe you put a film cut up of them together. If you can't meet with them because of the 20-hour rule, maybe you tell your GA or one of your analysts, hey, I want you to put some film clips together of Xavier and Lorenzo and Dion from their scout team work and put it together for me. I want to look at it. And then maybe because now with film today it's all digital, right? So I can go into a screen, I can literally digitally write. I can pause and say, you got to fix this first step, right? Watch this, and bam, you got to stick it or whatever. Or, hey, your alignment's not correct, or get in a better stance and then show the clip. You can do those things digitally, and then they can watch that stuff and review it and look at it, and then they keep going back to it. Like, that's what you should do. I mean, I was doing stuff like that at the D3 level, and we had flipping huddle, with the stuff Notre Dame's using. There's no reason you can't do that with young guys if you can't meet with them. So it's about putting value on it, Domer. It's just about saying, hey, look, this is important. We got to make sure that these young kids are getting coached up. Even if we're not necessarily counting on them right now, we may have to count on them down the road. And we need to make sure that there's not a year in which when it's finally their time is, well, this is the year where they get their feet wet. No, they can't. You can't. Once you're starting at Notre Dame, you can't get your feet wet. You got to be ready to roll unless you're a true freshman and there's no excuse. You know what I mean? Like, hey, what am I supposed to do? He's in high school last year. You know what I mean? Like, I'm okay with there being growing pains for Blake Fisher. He's a freshman.
Right.
There's nothing you could do. But there shouldn't be growing pains for Andrew Kristofic. He's in the third year in your program. There shouldn't be growing pains for Zeke Correll. He's in the third year in his program. He's had 2 starts, right? Same thing at receiver. So it's about looking at how are you running in your individual drills every day. Are we just doing the same drills every day? And if you're doing the same drills every day, then you should start tailoring your drills to more towards the players that need the development, right? Not the guys that are more advanced. Talk to the staff about you're making sure one of your GAs is a receivers coach. Or if you have a quarterback coach who's a GA, making sure that he's spending some time with the scout team guys. Hey, look, Tommy's got the quarterbacks, Dell's got the receivers. Maybe you have the GA take the scout team, the offensive GA, meet with the scout team guys a little bit and go over some of the stuff and talk them through the game plan. I mean, there's all types of things you can do to make sure that you're prioritizing younger players. And that's something that I've always commended Clark Lee on. It's something that I commended Mike Elson on a ton. And Keith Gilmore was this way as well, is you'd be at a practice and they're yelling and getting on, not yelling. When I mean yelling, I'm talking about coaching. Something when you're like 20 yards away or 20 feet from away from a guy and there's 100 people on campus, you have to yell to be heard. So what I mean is they're coaching up. The walk-on makes a mistake and he grabs them, coaches them up, and has them do it again. Whereas a lot of people, okay, nice try. Go get to the back of the end. Now let me get the scholarship guy up there. Right? I don't. The best coaches don't do that. If you're wearing a Notre Dame jersey, then I'm coaching you up.
Absolutely.
Right. And those are the things. And I think Coach Alexander's a smart guy. I think he's a good coach. I think he's a good dude. I want to see him make those changes, and I'm hoping he has, because I don't think just firing Dell is the answer, because Dell's a good coach. He just needs to get back. And we all lose our way sometimes.
Absolutely.
Right? It just happens. Maybe you have a head coach who maybe intimidates you a little bit, and I'm afraid of getting yelled at in practice. I mean, look, these are grown men. They don't like getting shown up in front of their players. And so you say, well, I'm not going to put young guys in a position to make a mistake where I get my butt chewed out.
Right.
And that's something Brian Kelly needs to recognize. Yeah. I mean, some coaches will do that, but it's coming. Like, hey, look, here's the deal, Brian. I'm going to get all over you today in practice, because and it's part of your strategy. It's like there's days I'd go into practice like today, there's nothing my players are going to do correct. Nothing.
Yep.
I'm going to be all over them. This is like in fall camp. It's not something you do Thursday before your biggest game of the year, And it's just, no, that's not good enough. Do it again, and here's what I want. And if it's not perfect, you're getting on them.
Right.
And then there's days you're like, you know what, man, I rode these kids hard in the last 3 days. Today is all hugs today.
Yep.
It's encouragement today. Yep. It's all part of the mental part of build toughness. Sometimes you got to build mental toughness through being hard on them, demanding, getting them to understand that perfection is the goal. Well, you can never be perfect, which means you're always working towards something, right?
Exactly.
You never get complacent.
That's the word. Right. It's complacency. You never want your players to be complacent. But then
sometimes you got to read your players, say, you know what? This kid's starting to get on that verge of losing confidence. Today it's, oh, buddy, that was a great route. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. No, you can do it, right? Right. And that's part of reading the room. And that's what great coaches do, in my opinion.
Yep. I could not agree more. And it's tough. Look, when you have quote unquote lost your way, you've got to kind of look in the mirror and kind of figure out what it is that you need to fix. And it's okay to talk to other people about it too. That's not just something you do on your own. Like, if there's something that I'm struggling with, I'm going to go to a peer. I'm going to go to whoever. Somebody that I trust, obviously, but to tell me, hey, man, clearly what I'm doing is not working. Help me to get back to where we need to be. Whatever the case may be. And it could be different for different people. But anyways, want to throw that out there. JoJo says, hey, Coach D and Vince, I heard ND knocked it out with 23 DeMathis Bardwell. How's
2023 D-end Matthias Bardwell.
Gotcha. Thank you. How's he pair, I'm guessing, with Keon Keeley at defensive end, or DJ Hicks, pipe dream, and who else do you like with the DTs in 23?
There's only a couple of DTs on the board right now, and as I've said before, I'm not super locked into all the 2023 board right now, because I'm focusing on 2022 more right now. But Matthias is a good player. He's a big kid, and hey, he's from Virginia, right?
Oh, well,
so clearly right there.
Well, clearly he's got that's a box that's checked.
He's more of a big end from what I see. More of a big end, maybe grows into a 3 technique, where Keon's more of a tall, skinny, explosive kind of guy. I honestly haven't watched much of David Hicks. When I watched when he got offered, he's another big power end that would fit in that strong side end position. But right now, other than Keon Keeley, it's a little bit early for me as far as keying in on too many defensive linemen. But they're going after some very talented players. They had a kid, I'm trying to remember his name. He was a 2023 kid that was on campus recently, big, tall kid, McDowell, right? He was on campus recently. So they're getting a ton of kids on campus. I'm trying to wait till the June visits is over and then talk to sources about, okay, who are you guys zeroing in on?
Yeah.
That's my plan.
That makes sense.
As of right now. And that's going to help me narrow some things down.
Well, and June is such a whirlwind, especially this June. It's like you almost have to reset your board a little bit once June is over to kind of figure out like, okay, where are we at? Where do we need to go from here? And that's important. Let's see here. JoJo says Notre Dame versus Oregon battling for both linebacker Jalen Snead and defensive end Cyrus Moss. I'm assuming, Coach, you prefer Moss, but we probably end up with Snead.
I mean, I don't look at it that way because they're different positions. I mean,
either or.
It's not about I want both of them. Right now, I would say Jalen Snead probably is the greater need from what you already have or don't have in the class. Where defensive end, if they get Cyrus Moss, that's phenomenal. But if they don't get Cyrus Moss, they're going to be okay.
Right.
Cyrus Moss just takes you even further. They need Jalen Snead. They want Cyrus Moss. Now they want Jalen Snead too, right? But I'm just talking about from looking at your depth chart in the future position.
Right.
That's a position that's more of a need. You have to get 4 linebackers in this class. You don't have to get 4 defensive ends. The only reason Notre Dame wants 4 defensive ends in this class is because Cyrus Moss is just too good. Right? He's too good. That's why they want him. And that's what they're going to try to convince him of this weekend. Say, hey, look, man, last time we signed 4 defensive ends, just saying all 4 of them got drafted. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, right.
But you'd be the best one of the group.
Off with that.
Yeah, you'd be the best D end of that group. So yeah, you're going to have a shot. You can play some end, you can play some Viper, you can move all around. We can do all these different things with you.
Sure.
We love you. You'd be the best. You'd be the best guy that we'd have. I mean, and I grade Cyrus Moss out higher than Jalen Snead.
Mm-hmm.
Jalen Snead ranks higher on my board just from a pure talent standpoint than Jalen Snead.
Right.
Having said that, it's not always about getting the best player. And this is why I've said this is one of the faults of recruiting rankings. You say, well, man, they got 4 top 50 defensive ends. Okay, great. But they got 0 corners.
Right.
Well, on the recruiting rankings, it's not going to show up as an issue. When you're evaluating based on did they fill their needs, did they have balance in the class, things like that, you can't judge that strictly by a points-based system. So they had the best D-line class in the country, and they had great safeties and the top cornerback, but they signed 1 offensive lineman who's bad. He's a 3-star, right? A real 3. I'm just saying that for argument's sake.
Right.
You struck out a linebacker, and you didn't get any corners. But it's going to look like a great class because you got 2 great running backs and a great quarterback and 5 great D-line. That's not a great class.
Right.
So when you talk about building a class, just because Cyrus is the better player doesn't necessarily mean he's the more the one that you can. Are you going to be okay if you miss on Cyrus? Yeah, you'll be okay. You're going to be way better if you get him, but you're going to be okay.
Right.
You're not in as good a shape if you don't get Jalen. You need Jalen. So I hope I'm making sense here. I'm not trying to say that if they miss Cyrus, no big deal. Anytime you get a chance to do that, to get one of these guys, you got to get it done. And Cyrus Moss is a gap closer, but Jalen Snead is a gap closer too, but Jalen Snead also plays a position where there's a greater need for that 4th guy than there is at defensive end.
Makes sense to me. Clayton says, Vince, love where you're at, or with where you're at. I remember working with you at a local retailer. You've mentioned in the past that job stunk, but talking Notre Dame football with you was a great way to pass the time. So you can see it's part of my blood, man. I'm talking Notre Dame football all the time, whether it's here with you guys or at some other former places of employment. So
is that a place where you had to wear an orange?
It might have been.
Okay.
Yeah, it might have been. Good to hear from you, Clayton. Good to hear from you. I'm glad you're on board with us, man. Jojo says, with Cheeks and Martinez canceling their upcoming visits to Notre Dame, does this mean we are sitting pretty good with the prior quadruple linebackers and with Morrison and Moore at defensive back?
I mean, I just look. That's what I said earlier. Just follow. Look what's happening. Connect the dots. You don't need me to say it, Jojo.
Yep.
You got this.
Yep. Domer since birth says, appreciate you all. Thanks for honoring the Dome and respecting the troops and doing what you do each day at 1:00 and more. Thanks, Domer. Appreciate that.
Hey, you want to know who else from Notre Dame does some great stuff with the troops? And this is look, go look into Brady Quinn's Third and Goal Foundation. If you're looking for ways, if you have money that you want to donate and you're looking for things, go look into Brady Quinn's Third and Goal Foundation. He looks, they look for they help veterans. They help, especially veterans who've served in the war. They do a lot of great work with honoring our troops through service. So if you're someone who likes to give to organizations that support our troops, check out Brady Quinn's Third and Goal Foundation.
Yep. Good call. Very good call. Revolver 6338. Could Bradshaw play running back if we miss out on the big 3?
It's a great question, but they don't need him to do that. They're good at running back because remember they already have Jadarian Price in the class, who's a talented 4-star, top 250 caliber running back. They got Audric Estime and Logan Diggs last year. They're okay at running back. They want Dallin. They want a second running back in this class because again, you look at Kyron Williams probably going to be gone after this year. Sebo's going to be gone after this year. If Chris Tyree is who you think he is, maybe he's not here for 4 years. So you want to have some protection, but it's more about those guys are just too good to say no to. Yeah. That's really where they're looking at. Like they're not recruiting Dallin Hayden and Nicholas Singleton and Gavin Sawchuk because, man, we need a second back. We're in trouble. We don't, Jadarian Price isn't a great player. No, he's a really good player. They love Jadarian Price. It's just, these guys are just good and we have a shot. So let's Let's swing for the fences.
Yeah.
That's good recruiting.
Right, exactly.
That's good recruiting.
JoJo says, Coach, what are the prospects of getting tackles Caden Proctor, Alex Birschmeyer, and Monroe Freeling, or do you like other recruits?
Way too early for that. Those are 2023 kids who are just now making visits for their first time. They're all 2023 kids. Yeah. They've had all three on campus this summer, which is great. I mean, that's a good sign. But it is way too early. As far as I know, none of those guys are close to being in decision-making mode. They also had Chase Basantis on campus recently. He's another stud 2023 recruit. Alex Birchmeyer's from Virginia, so obviously I like that. But it's way too early. And I know you guys are trying to talk 2023, but can we let the 2022 class fill out first? Before I can only watch so much film, right? It's way too early to be talking about those guys just yet, the offensive linemen.
Brent says, watch Amarion Walker end up as our highest-ranked wide receiver recruit. His meteoric rise to fame is kind of wild. I've heard rumblings that he will likely get a major bump in the rankings.
I don't care. It's based on what?
Yeah, right. Based on what? Based on the fact that Alabama probably.
A single camp that he hasn't been to that any of these people have been to.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. I'm with you.
I hope he does because that's good for Notre Dame. It's good for Notre Dame if Amorion Walker gets a recruit.
Absolutely.
And from everything I've heard about Amorion Walker, he's a great kid, works hard, great student. So if he gets a recruiting bump, good for him. I'm just telling you, it's not based off film. It's not based on what he does in pads.
Yeah.
When he does some in pads, and I'm hoping, I mean, trust me, look, y'all may think I have – this is what kills me. There are legitimately people out there that think I have a bias against Amorion Walker. For what? Like, what will my bias be based on? I don't like the kid's haircut or something? Like, that's absurd. The film tells me the story. That's where my opinions come from. If Amorion turns out to be a dude, great. That's huge for Notre Dame. And I'll be the first one to jump in line and say, hey, this kid got way better, right? But the film's got to tell me that. What he did in shorts doesn't matter to me.
Right.
Otherwise, Mike Mamula would have been a Hall of Famer.
Right. That's wow. Wayback Machine.
I mean, that was the first combine hero, right? Like that was the first Tony Mandrich. You know what I mean? Like I mean, I was watching something the other day where they were like the 5 fastest 40 times at the combine. Like 3 of those guys never did anything in the NFL.
Right.
Like John Ross, got drafted in the top 5, right? Because he ran a 4.22 at the combine. He was a good player at Washington. He had productive at Washington, but you could see holes in his game even in Washington. He got drafted so high by the Bengals because he ran a 4.22.
Yeah, I remember that.
That guy barely has more career NFL catches than I have. I'm just saying.
I'm just laughing.
I'm just saying.
It's fine. JoJo says, happy Father's Day weekend, guys. Go into it the family to the Yankee game Sunday. Discounted tickets from work. Well played. I'd even go see a Yankees game if the tickets were free or discounted. I mean, and celebrating my birthday. So happy birthday, JoJo.
Yeah, he had. So what had that been? Tuesday would have been your birthday, JoJo, the 15th. So happy birthday to you, buddy.
Yep. Yeah.
Happy birthday. And then enjoy your Father's Day. I have not been to the new Yankee Stadium for a football game or a baseball game, but I have been for a football game, obviously. But my wife and I, the last year when we knew that Yankee Stadium was going to be torn down, that last year, I used to be a huge baseball fan. I'm not anymore. I used to be a big baseball fan, but I was like, I got to go to Yankee Stadium to see a game before they tear it down. So my wife and I flew out from Colorado, met her, her second dad, and we went to a Yankee game together. That was pretty awesome. And then to see the new Yankee Stadium was pretty cool too. Because I'm sitting trying to watch a football game, and I'm just like, this is Yankee Stadium. This is so cool. So I've actually watched more football games in Fenway and Yankee Stadium than I've watched baseball games.
That's fair.
Go figure that out.
Right. Let's see here. Jordan says, love the long drawn out stories and insights about your lives. I'm not sure if that's sarcasm or not.
No, it's not. I don't think it is. Not from Jordan.
I'm joking.
I mean, that's not really a question you can answer in 20. I mean, I can't answer any question in 20 seconds.
No, not
First of all. Second of all, you asked me something about that was a pretty in-depth question. So
it was, and I loved it. I thought it was fun. Brent says, thanks, Coach D, for talking sense into me regarding Arch Manning. I had my head in the clouds for a minute, LOL. And I think that was a comment that was on the Irish Breakdown Facebook page, right?
Yeah, so what happened was I actually texted people were saying that Arch Manning was the silent to Notre Dame.
Right.
And I was like, where's this coming from? And they were like, Tom Loy at Irish Illustrated. And I was like, I guarantee you Tom didn't say that.
Yeah.
Because Tom didn't. And so I texted Tom about that last night, and he was like, that was a joke. Like it was so, but what happens is people who maybe don't read all the time, or like, people that didn't know the they just saw that one thing and it spreads around, people taking screenshot of this one comment and then just spreads around and it becomes this. I've had 5 people text me or DM me about, is Arch Manning a silent to Notre Dame? Just kind of laugh. But no, he's not a silent to Notre Dame. That was a joke that Tom was making that some people have taken and run with and turned it into something that else. It's not. Yeah. Arch Manning's not coming to Notre Dame.
No, he's probably not coming. No, I mean, I shouldn't say probably. He's not coming to Notre Dame.
That'd be the biggest shocker of all time. Now, would I like for it to happen? Sure, it'd be great, but it's
a good quarterback.
It's a really good quarterback.
Yeah. Where do you think he's going to go?
I don't know. Okay. I mean, I don't really follow his recruitment. I think that everybody just assumes he's either going to go to Ole Miss, Tennessee, or Duke.
Yeah, right.
Ole Miss, where his grandpa and uncle went. Tennessee, where his uncle went. And then Duke, because that's where David Cutcliffe went. And everyone not named Archie Manning has played for David Cutcliffe. I don't see him going to Duke.
Yeah.
Although that would be an epic recruiting class that Duke would bring in, because you better believe that there'd be dudes signing up to play with Arch Manning.
Absolutely.
But I just don't see that. I mean, he's still got 2 years of high school left, and I don't know if David Cutcliffe has 6 years or even 5 years of coaching left in him. I just don't see that.
Of life? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, dude, not cool. Not cool.
I'm joking. He's just older for a coach. All right.
If I had a mute button, I would have muted that.
You can mute me, by the way.
No, I mean, like, the edit button. We don't have the edit button.
Go back. Yeah, I got you. Yeah. See, that's the downfall of the live shows. Lauren Hamilton says, one of the biggest reasons I love the show, it gives me topics to have chats with either of my 2 grandfathers. Both have law degrees from Notre Dame and still love hearing about the program.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Glad we could help with that, by the way. Because
I won't tell you what I have to do in order to have topics of conversation with my grandmother.
That sounds deep. I don't know if I want to touch that one.
The shows that I have to watch that she watches that no one else will watch that I watch because it gives my 89-year-old grandmother somebody to call and talk to.
Fair enough.
I think you can read between the lines.
Yeah, my grandmother and I used to sort baseball cards. That was like one of her
seriously.
Things to do.
That's awesome.
That's why I became a Cubs fan.
I still have like 30,000 baseball cards in my basement, Vince. If you want them to share with your kids.
D-Rock, he's hitting me back because I said he listens to a lot of podcasts. He goes, I go into other podcasts. By far, Brian and Vince, the IB show rocks with content and followers.
Appreciate that, buddy.
Thanks, brother. I appreciate it.
Very much.
I wasn't knocking you. I promise.
Yeah, it was. I'm your guy, D-Rock. I always have your back.
Wow.
Sorry, Vince.
Tommy says, absolutely, D-Rock by far best in terms of quality and quantity. Yes, quantity we got in spades. There's no doubt about that. Christopher Sally says, daughter just finished freshman year at Notre Dame.
That's awesome.
She rushed the field.
Good for her.
Good for her. My wife and I have never been to a game. What home game this season would you suggest for first time Notre Dame parents? USC, right?
Yeah, well,
that's what I would say.
Let me throw a couple qualifiers in there.
Okay. All right.
For John, because number one, John is paying tuition for a Notre Dame student. So there's a chance John might be pinching pennies a little bit. Or Chris. Yes. I don't know why I said John. Christopher Sally is pinching pennies a little bit, maybe because he's sending his daughter to Notre Dame. If that is the case, then I would suggest Purdue or Cincinnati. Would be your first game to kind of, because it's still going to be a good environment. Cincinnati's going to be a big game, but they're afternoon games. Toledo, I would say no to, because number one, it's going to be a bad opponent. They're going to blow them out. And I have heard tickets for that game are really expensive because it's the first home game. It's the first home game in a year. I mean, that people can go to. Nobody could go last year.
Okay, good point.
So people want to be at that first game. But Purdue and Cincinnati, if you want to go to a game that's about nostalgia, the Navy game is awesome to go to.
It is, yeah.
It is a great game to go to. Great crowd. The Navy people are awesome. You'll get an awesome flyover. Stay after the game and watch the alma maters, because it's so cool, because Notre Dame will go down and they will honor Navy during the singing of their alma mater. Then the Notre Dame team goes down and does their alma mater, and Navy reciprocates.
Right.
It's really a great scene. Yep. And again, we've gotten stealth bombers in recent years for those games. I think, wasn't it the last stealth? I think was the Air Force game. I mean, it's so cool.
Yeah,
it's a great environment if you're a Notre Dame fan. If you're just looking for a big game, like an awesome, exciting college football game, it's either USC or North Carolina, are both going to be huge.
And those are both night games,
back-to-back night games. And then obviously USC is the game.
Right.
So those are the games I would look at, and
I like that.
I think there's only 2 home games that I would say I wouldn't necessarily be thrilled about. The Toledo one would be first, and then the Georgia Tech game, because I think Georgia Tech's going to be okay, but it's Georgia Tech. It's going to be November 20th. It's probably going to be pretty cold.
Right.
So, those other that's kind of how I would view those. So, I mean, ultimately, what you're looking for is going to determine it. But hey, congrats on having a daughter at Notre Dame.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
That's
and I'm sorry I called you John. I don't know where the heck that came from. Your name like a John on my screen. I'm like, how did I get John?
I don't know how you got.
Oh, John Sally. Okay, that's where it came from.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah.
That's why I had. Look, I've been sick. All right, no excuses. Play like a champion. I didn't play like a champion on that one. I apologize. 76.
All right, that's good. Oh, Wade, poor Wade. Wade says, as a Browns fan, can we not mention the name John Elway here ever again?
Look, I sincerely apologize about the Broncos beating the Browns in 3 AFC championships in 4 years. I sincerely apologize for that. I apologize that the 3 best Brown teams of the last 40 years did not go to the Super Bowl because of the Broncos. I was very insensitive. I was very not taking your feelings into account, and I apologize for talking about the greatest quarterback of all time. We won't talk about the drive anymore. We won't talk about the fumble anymore. I promise.
All right. Anyway.
Hey, and just so I won't wait to understand, I grew up in Northwest Ohio in Cleveland Brown territory as a Bronco fan. The amount of trash that I heard talk to me leading up to those games, I still have about a decade worth of payback because of everything I had to hear from Browns fans leading up to those games. I'm just saying.
I bet you do. Yeah. We were talking about Brian Kelly potentially leaving or whatever. How long will he stick around? And Matt D says if Kelly won this year, he would come back in 22 to try to pass Lou Holtz. That's the ego for a competitor. I really hope the plan is for a certain assistant to take over, Freeman.
So here's an interesting one. Okay. So let's just say Brian Kelly wins the title this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be really curious to see how you would be able to stack up his career against Lou Holtz, because overall Lou Holtz has a better winning percentage. I don't think Brian Kelly
a lot better actually.
He'd have to coach for several more years and have elite
Brian Kelly has more wins, but the percentage
and more time
is different.
But here's the deal, though: Lou Holtz left Notre Dame in not a great spot. If we're being honest,
and not many people will talk about that, by the way.
Well, the people
bring it up.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean,
right? And again, I love Lou. Lou is part of the connection to my fandom as a Notre Dame fan. I mean, is Lou Holtz and all that. But the fact of the matter is he did not leave Notre Dame in a great spot. I mean, they weren't great his last. I mean, they were 8-3, 9-3. They had the 1-6-5 year, and they were still ranked his last couple of years. But he didn't leave them in a great spot. They were trending down. He wasn't in a place where he could really dictate who replaced him. It wasn't a great place. Brian Kelly won't have the win. I mean, Lou Holtz. I'm looking at the numbers here. Lou Holtz had a 765 win percentage. He went 130-2. Brian Kelly is 95-39 and no ties. Obviously, he'd have to coach for a lot of years and win 11, 12 games a year to catch Lou Holtz's winning percentage. But part of that's because that 4-8 year really dragged him really hurt him down.
Yeah.
But
and does that include the vacated wins, by the way?
It does.
Okay.
It does.
Which I would do too. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. That's all.
Let me just pull this up just to make sure. Because you eventually may be onto something here. Let's see here. Yeah, it include it does not. It does not include all of them. It looks like that was not updated. So Brian Kelly, they took 21 wins, so he's 102-39.
Okay.
And then Lou Holtz is 130. So I mean that's a lot of wins he'd have to get with not a lot of losses to pass. Right. But you have to look at it and say the legacy of Lou Holtz also includes Bob Davie. If Brian Kelly left as a winner, won a title, left Notre Dame on an ascending trail, then his replacement comes in, keeps winning. That is part of Brian Kelly's legacy.
That's true.
So that's how Brian Kelly could surpass Lou Holtz. It's not necessary. Now he could win 2 titles, but let's be honest, that's going to be tough. But if he can leave Notre Dame in a place where, 5-10 years after Brian Kelly left, you're still talking about him because it all was built from him.
Sure.
Right? If Dabo Swinney retired tomorrow and Tony Elliott took over and Clemson kept winning, we'd still be talking about Dabo 5, 6, 7 years from now.
Sure.
Right? Because he's the one that built that. And that's the difference. That's how ultimately I think Brian Kelly can pass Lou Holtz is more that as opposed to just he won more titles.
Makes sense. Tyler says, with the work Freeman has been putting in on the recruiting trail and assuming he's only at Notre Dame for 2 years before taking a head coaching job, how does that affect the recruits that he got? Do they transfer?
I doubt it. I mean, the kids that Clark Lee recruited aren't transferring. You know, if they like it at Notre Dame and they're playing, they're going to stay. Guys that are coming here from Marcus Freeman now, if they're not playing, they may transfer. But I mean, he's not. If he brings in 20 defensive players the next 2 years, you're not going to have 17 transfers if he takes the coaching ahead. Plus, I think you're going to see a transition to, a Mike Mickens type of person is what I think would be a great thing. So that the scheme will continue.
Sure, absolutely.
But no, I don't see that happening. It's not. I think it won't. Look, I don't think Notre Dame's going to be impacted as much from the transfer portal as other programs. They're going to lose some guys. They've already lost some guys, but it's not usually going to be guys that they want or guys that are playing. And most top teams aren't going to lose guys. They're not going to lose your starting Mike linebacker because Marcus Freeman left. They're not going to lose any starters or even any rotation guys because Marcus Freeman leaves. If that in fact happens, the hypothetical of this, it's the guys who aren't playing that'll leave. But that's going to happen anyway, whether Marcus Freeman's here or not.
Yeah. Agreed.
But hopefully his head coaching job in a couple of years doesn't actually take him anywhere.
Right. Yeah, exactly. In Freeman's 335, Felix has to say this. Is Freeman's 335 requiring a classic zero technique? Could we see the Irish going after bigger nose tackles in the future?
No, it's not what they look for. It's about penetration, quickness, aggressiveness. It's about being disruptive with athleticism and technique and leverage. Those are the things that they're looking for.
Where the nose just takes up space.
It's not like they don't like. Look, if would Notre Dame today recruit Louis Nix? Absolutely,
right.
Because Louis Nix was an athletic, Louis Nix type of player. He was an athlete. He was a quick, agile type of guy. He could play in this defense. Do you have to recruit a Louis Nix? No, you don't. You could have and we saw it at Cincinnati. I mean, look at who they have there now. They have Howard Cross playing nose tackle. They have Kurt Heinrich playing nose tackle. I don't think you need that 320-pound eat two, because here's the deal. It's not a two-gap defense. One-gap defense means each defensive lineman is responsible for one gap, either A gap, B gap, C gap, or D gap, depending on if there's a tight end attached. Okay, and it could be A strong, A weak, whatever. A two-gap deal is when you are more taken on a blocker, and I have to be. So if I'm a nose tackle, I'm engaged with the center. I have both A gaps are my responsibility, and I'm eating up space. Right, the way that Notre Dame runs their defense, it's a one gap defense, meaning you have one gap responsibility, and you're gonna eat up that gap with quickness, with leverage, with positioning, not so much just powering people. So that's been true for a while. I mean, there were 3-4. I think the Chargers back in the day, I think when Norv Turner was there, they were a 3-4 team, but they were more of a one-gap 3-4 defense. The Cowboys recently, when they were a 3-4, I believe they were a one-gap 3-4 defense. So not every defense is the same. Not every 3-4 defense is run the same.
Right.
Notre Dame's 3-4 was that way with Bob Diaco. It was a space-eating defense at the nose position more often than not. But there were still plenty of times where those guys had – and that's why Stephon Tuitt had a lot of sacks, but not a lot of tackles for loss. I think he had 12 sacks and then 13 tackles for loss, which means his 13 tackles for loss, 12 of them were against the pass. Only one came against the run. Right. Whereas Sheldon Day in 2015 had 4.5 sacks, but he had 15.5 tackles for loss, right? Because Stephon wasn't put in positions where he was the one making a lot of the plays against the run. He was beating up blockers and letting the linebackers make plays. Yep. Marcus Freeman's defense is more about the defensive linemen making plays first. Then the linebackers can clean up is how it's going to go.
Brent says, I think pretty much everyone wants Marcus Freeman to be the coach in waiting. The question becomes, how long would he be willing to wait? He's already pretty much a rock star. Hopefully it works out. It's a good question.
I mean, he's a rock star now, but if they give up 30 points in the second game of the year, then that's just how fans are, right?
Absolutely.
He's right now he's a rock star because he has given up 0 points at Notre Dame as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I mean, look, after 2017, when Notre Dame ran for 260 yards a game, there were times in that year where people were talking about Chip Long's going to be the next head coach of Notre Dame. Remember that?
Yep.
Then it was Mike Elko. Then it was kind of Clark Lee. And, look, I think Marcus Freeman could absolutely be the next head coach. Whether or not he stays beyond 2 years is going to depend on, number one, how much he likes it at Notre Dame. Number one, how much his family likes this area. Number three, have him and Brian Kelly had some conversations about, here's my plan. my contract runs through this year, 2024. I'm done after that. I'd love to be able to turn this program over to you when I leave.
Yeah.
I could see that conversation would have to happen for Marcus
agree.
Freeman to stay beyond a couple of years. But look, I don't disagree with any of the love for Marcus Freeman. None of it. I've been excited about that hire.
Absolutely.
Just before they made it. I mean, when Clark Lee left, the first article I wrote said my number one out of the program hires Marcus Freeman.
And you and I talked about it then. Remember that? We were talking about him.
Grand Slam. I love what Marcus Freeman's doing. And he's done nothing since he's got here but to confirm why we were high on him.
Yes.
But can we let him coach a game first?
You're such a stickler.
I know.
You're such a stickler.
I know.
All right. Tommy's got a nice little story here. He goes, listening to the linebacker show, and while you're playing the first set of film, I just got done yelling through my windshield at someone, and at the perfect time you say, that's just not nice. He goes, made my wife chuckle. I thought that was good. Matt says, I'm really looking forward to Saturday, hoping Nawamaka picks Notre Dame. How are you feeling on this, Brian? Vince? I take all my cues from Brian. So,
it's going to be a good weekend. I don't know how many times I can answer the same question over and over and over again.
I know, without answering the same question.
Right, but I would make sure you follow him on Twitter but look, let's let the kid have his moment, right? That's where it ultimately comes down from.
100%.
And then we can talk about it afterwards.
Yes. Jacob says, I did. What were we talking about?
We were talking about, I said that he's on vacation. He also ordered some IB merch while he was on vacation.
Yes, he goes, I did. He goes, next year I'll be rocking that IB gear. Yes, Good man. Good.
I'm telling you, if we have our tailgates next year and people aren't rocking the Irish breakdown gear, I'm going to be a little perturbed.
Yeah,
I'm just perturbed. We're thinking about putting like a gate around, and it's like you either have to pay $5 to get in, or you can get in for free if you're rocking Irish breakdown gear.
Ooh, I like that.
I'm just joking. I wouldn't do that.
I know
kidding.
You wouldn't, but
I wouldn't pay $5 to hear myself talk. I don't think anyone else should. My parents probably wouldn't pay $5 to come hear me talk. I said, I'll just call you tomorrow.
Oh boy. Paul says, what was the offense in 1973? Double or single wing, or could Buckner, being a runner, could run some of those plays? Secondly, can some of Rockney's box formation plays ever be utilized?
Wow. Paul, I mean no disrespect here, but that was 5 years before I was born. I have not studied whether it was a double or single, and I'm not being disrespectful. I mean, I can kind of look it up as we're talking, but look, could something like that be used? I think something like that could be used.
Some wrinkles of
goal line situation, short yardage situation.
It could be something that's not expected.
Yeah, it would look a little bit different just because of how formations are so much different now. But I mean, could you honestly, if I was Tommy Rees, if Tommy Rees wanted to endear himself to Notre Dame fans and just truly become an offensive rock star, there's a lot of things he needs to do, and we've talked about those. But one thing he would do if he came out in the game, let's say against Toledo, and they did the box formation. It did the shift that they did back. Because remember, they would do that shift. If they did something like that and direct snapped it to Kyron Williams, oh my gosh.
How funny would that be?
That would be funny. That would be awesome.
Or just come out in a full house backfield on the goal line.
Just something that's ends,
three running backs.
You're paying homage to the past, but also practically realizing that this can be effective and as a wrinkle. But then, of course, it's not something you can do every time because then people are going to kind of get a read on it or whatever.
Sure.
But that'd be a pretty savage move. And you better work, because if you go to the box and it doesn't work, you're getting ripped by your head coach on the side.
That's a really good point.
But I would love that. That'd be amazing.
Are you still looking for film, or you want me to move on?
No, I'm not looking for film. I'm looking it up. So just go ahead and just keep.
Joe says, kind of also throwing it into the Wayback Machine. He goes, is it a coincidence that Notre Dame hasn't won a championship since they left champion apparel? Just saying.
No, because they had some pretty – no. I love where his head's at, though, but no, it has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
If Bob Davie came with the best gear in the world, Bob Davie still wasn't winning football games at Notre Dame.
It's fair.
It's not the gear.
Tommy says, and y'all got me home yesterday, 14 hours on the road from Daytona to Massillon. My family learned more about Notre Dame than they ever cared to know. That's good. That's good. I like
what I've found out is that there's a lot of Notre Dame fans that love our show, but their children hate us. They're forced to listen to our show.
Oh, well, speaking of children listening
We have
to
a
the show,
generation of children that are going to grow up hating the phrase
No.
Irish breakdown.
so I'm driving my son to practice, and we were listening to your interview on WSBT live, and I forget what you were talking about, one of the recruits or whatever, and my son Dylan, he goes, "Oh, he was just talking about that in the linebacker podcast." I go,
Nice.
I did a double take. I go,
Right.
What?
He was listening to our nightly podcast.
He was listening to the pod. He goes, "Yeah, sometimes I throw it on, listen about 20, 25 minutes." He says, just in the background. I go, That's a good man. Keeping it in the family.
I like your kid.
I
He
know,
listens to
right?
our show more than you do.
I know. What is up with that? Let's see here. Jojo says, thank you guys for hearing how you guys got into the insight into coaching and what you guys do. Let's see here. Big Jim says Cone may be better than Book, and I loved Book.
That's interesting because Big Jim hasn't been on the show in a while, but when he was, that's one of the topics we talked about. He's definitely an Ian Book fan, so for him to say that's pretty impressive. I think he's going to be better than Ian Book, but people that know me and know my opinion of that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be a great quarterback.
That's fair.
But no, I think he's at least going to be better than Book as a passer.
Okay.
Now, here's the thing is, if the offensive line doesn't step up and play better, they're going to miss a little bit of Ian's escapability.
Sure.
But I do think Jack is going to be able to make some plays from the pocket even under pressure. But that's where it could get a little bit interesting, is if the offensive line's not good in pass pro this year. Jack doesn't have the ability to escape the way that Ian did and turn something into nothing.
Right.
He's going to beat you with his arm.
Right.
And but if all things being equal around him, I think Jack Cohn's definitely a better quarterback than Ian Book.
Matt says, I know Cone is likely our guy this season and gives us the best chance to win. I still hope they give Pine and or Buckner gets playing time so he or Pine don't get killed in 2022 at Ohio State. Yeah. I agree. We've talked about this. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that, they need to figure out a way to get those guys on the field, whoever the number 2 guy is, and frankly, maybe even the 3rd guy at times. But I
think that both of those guys need to play at times.
I agree.
And if Buckner is playing early in a rotational role, there's going to be times when you do mop up where I'm going to want to I may give like Buckner a series as the mop up quarterback. Maybe I'd give him a series like late in the 3rd quarter, Toledo, when you've got some starters still in the game.
Right. And
then maybe you give him 1 or 2 series. Then I'd bring Pine in and get him some work too. Right, I'd like to see both of them, because just because Buckner's ready to be the guy in a rotational role because of his athleticism doesn't necessarily mean he's going to be ready to go be the full-time starter the year after.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Let's see here.
I hope he is, because he's their most physically gifted quarterback.
Right. Snead says he's committing in the next couple of weeks. So we were talking about Jalen Snead. Kevin says, who would you want at quarterback this year and in order? Quinn, Cone, Book, turnover Reese. I guess we know where he lands. Reese's Force, just wanted to add him as he's the OC. And would you say Cone is comparable to Quinn?
Okay, so first of all, I would not want Tommy Reese as the quarterback's coach because then they'd need a new offensive coordinator.
Right.
So with Tommy as the offensive coordinator, in that order, it would be Brady Quinn, and then everyone else.
It really would.
I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, and that's no shot at Jack Cohn, but Brady Quinn was a great college quarterback and a winner, and I think he would thrive in this offense. Quick decisions, getting the ball out. That's a lot of stuff that he did with Charlie, the look screens and stuff like that. When he was really good at seeing that, and a lot of that stuff was, I mean, they were kind of RPOs,
Mm-hmm.
So I think he would thrive, and I think Brady was a better player. And then next would be Cohn, and then coach, and then Ian Book.
Yep, I'm with you 100%.
And I do not think Cohn is I think Brady had a stronger arm than Cohn, not by a ton, but he had a stronger arm. I think Cohn's more accurate than Brady Quinn was. I think Brady was stronger. I mean, Brady can bounce off. I mean, how many times have Brady bounced off sacks and those kind of things? But also Brady also brought you a lot off the not just how he played, but from a leadership standpoint, all that kind of stuff. I'm not saying Jack can't be that, but we don't know if he is that yet.
I don't know that. Yeah, that's where we stand today on June 18th. So Big Jim says, I love that Burnham came into town and hung out with Junior.
And he's probably going to be back this weekend too.
Is he really?
Nolan Ziegler's definitely coming back, and Burnham might come back this weekend as well. Those kids are all in that. It's thing. It's great that he did that, but that also tells me he's all in at Notre Dame.
Right. Because he's
that's
literally
important.
recruiting somebody at his position,
Right?
or at least
his position group. His
Yeah,
position
right.
group. Right.
Liam Gaming says, which defense is better for a safety to showcase his talent, Notre Dame or Ohio State? I'm thinking about Nawamaka.
I think both of them are. I mean, look, I'm not going to sit there and take some shots at Ohio State. Obviously, they've had a great deal of success. I personally think it's the Notre Dame defense as far as spotlighting it from the standpoint of there's an easier path to him playing. But in regards to production and things like that, they both offer it. I would say that the Notre Dame offense is a little bit more versatile in how they use their safeties. I think they can adapt to personnel, or at least they've shown the ability to adapt to personnel.
Right.
Look, Ohio State's had plenty of. I mean, 2018, their leading tackler was a safety. The thing is that you're in a different system now with both teams. Ohio State's going into year 2 of the Kerry Coombs era, and Marcus Freeman's going into year 1 of Notre Dame. So we still don't know for sure what Marcus Freeman's going to defense is going to look like. But based on what he did at Cincinnati, I would imagine that the safeties are going to be used a lot and used effectively. But they're used effectively at Ohio State too, if they have good ones. I mean, so I don't think that's going to necessarily be the difference. I think the bigger thing to me, that as far as Liam, to answer your question, it's not so much which defense big picture is better for safeties, because they're both better for safeties. It's how specifically does each program picture Xavier Nwankpa's role.
Right.
And I think the role that Notre Dame is pitching Xavier is looking a little different from what I'm being told that the role that Ohio State's pitching Xavier.
Okay.
That doesn't mean better or worse. It's just different. That could ultimately be the thing that's because Notre Dame's basically saying, see number 14? Yeah, that's you.
I mean, that's
a great selling point.
I was going to say
it's a great selling point.
There are a lot worse ways to try to recruit a kid than pointing at an All-American and saying that could be you. I mean, I just, I have no problem.
It's not just saying it, but it's like he's tall, he's long, he's smart, he's athletic, and that's what Xavier is.
But showing that this really could be you.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Matty K says, don't know if you guys covered this or not, but I saw that Alabama is now favored to get Anthony Lucas. Also, Miami is ahead of Notre Dame for him. Does this mean ND is out of the race for Lucas or no?
I don't know who at 24/7 said that, but no, Notre Dame is not trailing anybody for Anthony Lucas right now. They are very much in the mix. This is going to continue to play out. This is why you don't react to hot takes from those sites. Just let it play out. Notre Dame is not out for Anthony Lucas. Those are programs he's about to visit. He hasn't even visited them yet.
Right.
So just let it play out. Notre Dame's in a good place with Anthony Lucas.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to find some questions.
Yeah, there was a bunch of comments about Jalen Snead and Sonny and but it was just comments and stuff that we kind of already talked about. So let's see. Here we go. Richard says, great discussion, guys. Your favorite gap closers in this year's class? ? Love your optimism, Brian. Do you really think the Irish can win it all this year?
My favorite gap closers on offense, obviously Tobias Merriweather, Savion Bradshaw are certainly there. Dallin Hayden's my favorite running back in the class. I think he's a really good one. Defensively, some of my favorite gap closers, they've already landed. Josh Burnham's already in the class. I think the defensive end as a whole, that group is gap closers. Of the uncommitted guys, Jalen Snead is there, and Xavier Nwankpa on the second and third level. And then up front, it's Anthony Lucas and Cyrus Moss. You can get either one of those two defensive linemen. That's huge, and I'm talking like the pure gap closers, not like Devin Moore's a gap closer, Benjamin Morrison's a gap closer, right? From what we talked about, like they closed the gap, but all the guys that I just mentioned, I view as not gap closers as much as they're just, the gap is gone at that point in time with those particular players. When we talked, somebody just asked a question, Matty K just asked a question about Anthony Lucas. Well, look, Alabama's pushing for him, right?
Sure.
So if Alabama wants a defensive lineman that bad, clearly they think that kid can play there, and you get him in. Right. If you're able to get him instead, then obviously that's a gap closer.
Yep.
Kevin had a comment right before that. Did you see that, Vince?
I did. I didn't know if you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
You go and read the question.
Yeah. Are there any other YouTubers or analysis that break down plays that you like watching? I'm particular to the QB School and Brett Coleman.
The reason I wanted to answer this, Kevin, is because it's not that I don't necessarily like watching other people. It's just that I try not to watch a lot of other people, number one, because then it's like, okay, well, then if I go out and do a video and I happen to have the same opinion as that person, then it's like, okay, you did a video, you watch that guy, you jacked that. Plus, in your own head, you start to think like, okay, did I think that, or did he do that?
It's funny that you say that, because when you and I were competitors for about a month and a half, 2 months, whatever, I tried hard not to look at your stuff while I was writing my stuff, because then it would like become my opinion.
Right.
And that was never a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, because when you start watching somebody else, then it can form your opinion, and that's not the way you want to do it. You want to have
now there are people like, and I don't know who the QB school of Brett Coleman is. I would imagine he doesn't do Notre Dame stuff, but like, look, here's the deal. I also don't have a lot of time to watch other people.
Right.
But I do. And when I have time to kind of relax and watch something, I prefer to get my mind off of it a little bit, so Vince and I have shows that we both watch, we're both SEAL team guys. We both watch Bull, although I may not be watching Bull anymore.
I dropped a bomb on you.
Yeah, I watch Blue Bloods, but I also watch like a lot of history stuff. I've been watching some Mafia history stuff today.
And you and I are working our way through the Avengers.
Yeah. If I'm doing it for like the fourth time, Vince is doing it for the first time.
For the first time, sorry.
It's all good. But the other thing is, if there are people that break down film that don't talk Notre Dame, send them my way, Kevin, because I like listening. Because here's what I do listen to. This is the other thing I was going to say is I listen to coaches that do video. Like, so there's the Steve Sarkisian video talking about RPOs. I'll watch that stuff, because I do also have to be able to stay up on trends and stay up on things like that, right?
Absolutely.
And so, like, there's coaching videos on campus. I signed up for the Cool Clinic, which is the offensive line clinic Jeff Quinn spoke at. I signed up for that, paid to be able to watch all those, listen to those guys talking ball, because they're talking ball. So, like, I'm learning. I'm not going to go do an offensive line video like Jeff Quinn did, or like the other coaches in it did. So there's no concern of
stealing.
This is my info. You know what I mean? And I don't never steal, but it's like you just start to get that internal mind, like, okay, I'm going to say the same thing that he said.
Sure.
You just kind of get into that. And that's why I don't read. And I've had this conversation with other people that cover the beat. Like, there's a reason I don't read other people's stuff. Number one, it's I don't have time. Number two, it's I want to focus on what I'm writing.
Sure.
And, and that's how it is. Yeah. If you're reading a lot of other people's work, you have too much time on your hands, and you're probably doing it to, find stuff to write about, if you catch my drift.
Sure. Jordan, I think you hinted to this earlier, but Jordan says, if Junior commits tomorrow, are you doing a show?
Yes.
There you go.
Probably about a half an hour after it happens. If it happens.
If people. Kevin says, you have a Gap Closers t-shirt. Any likelihood that you can get particular players after their commitment with their name, i.e., I got the Snead Gap Closed
That have to happen pretty quickly. I also don't like having stuff that would have a college player on it for a number of reasons. Number one, it looks too, for me, it would look too fanish, honestly. And then also, I believe that if you're going to put a player's name or something on there, you need to be paying that player for his face and his image, right? This was all stuff designed by my wife, so it's not. I didn't get it from anywhere else. If I'm going to put a kid's picture on a shirt, then that kid should be getting some of that stuff. And like I said, it just, at the end of the day, it's really he's just kind of joking. That's a great idea. That'd be a fun idea. I wouldn't do that. It would look too fanboyish, in my opinion.
Yeah, I hear you. Matt says, all the recruits I saw in interviews, they all said Kelly was a genuine guy. That's good news. That means he's actually talking to those guys.
It's great.
Which is awesome.
And it means he's not just giving them a pitch, right? Like, what that tells me more than anything is someone who follows
other
this
stuff.
He's not just sitting down saying, okay, here's the final pitch. I'm telling all y'all the same thing. It's he's sitting down talking to him, and that requires a conversation. So what can happen is if Brian Kelly's just meeting with these kids for like 5 minutes in the end of a visit, and it's just like telling them the same thing over and over again, you're not going to come across thinking he's a genuine. You're going to say, okay, that's how they end the visit. That tells me he's sitting down, he's talking to him, he's engaging in conversation, he's trying to get to know him a little bit, and that's incredibly important.
Absolutely. Tom says, Brian or Vince, anything either of you would do differently or add to Notre Dame's recruiting efforts if you were the Notre Dame recruiting coordinator? Thanks again for the show, as always.
Well, number one, I would expand. I would convince the head coach as much as I could to expand the back office.
Yes,
people that can scour film, can look at it, transcripts, that can engage in social media. I think those are big things. You got to find out what kids are interested in. and then go after those things, so really making sure my social media team is as deep as it can possibly be without it being too much. I think that's part. I think also including some people from the programs in the school, maybe create an internship where students can come work as in the football office, because there's going to be a vested interest in people that go to the school, and obviously clearly they love Notre Dame. But then more practically speaking, I think things I would do is I would make sure that as the recruiting coordinator, that every single coach is being held accountable. I would make sure that there is a greater understanding of where people are on the board, that we're recruiting the entire board, that we're making sure that our reach is wide enough to where we have good plan Bs. And I'm talking about the good kind of plan Bs, not like, okay, I got to have somebody. That's not a plan B to me. That's a oh crap recruit. There's been guys that were plan Bs. Jeremiah Usu-Cormo was a plan B guy, right? I mean, if Notre Dame would have recruited that class effectively, there wouldn't have been room for him when Clark Lee came. He wasn't a plan B for Clark Lee, but I mean, if it wasn't for new coaches being fired or old coaches being fired and all that, he's not in Notre Dame.
Right.
And he turned out to be a pretty good player. There's been guys like that necessarily weren't the top guy that ended up being pretty good players. Everett Golson was a plan B for Notre Dame. They had other quarterbacks they liked better. That worked out pretty good. Ian Book was a plan B, right? That worked out pretty good. So I think that would, just making sure that everybody's recruiting the board effectively. And I think that there would be regions that I would make sure that we're hitting a little bit harder. I would really work hard to get back into the Mid-Atlantic even more than they are now. Some of the things that I would have changed, Tom, if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, some of the answers I would have given you are already being carried out.
Right.
You got to recruit the Southwest harder. Texas and Arizona have to become bigger places for you. They're doing that. I want to see them getting back to being more effective with top level players on the West Coast. They're already doing that.
Right.
Look, you can't ignore Florida the way that they were in previous years. They're already doing that. So that's the thing is some of the things you have to be more proactive from a social media standpoint, from a, use your, the name, image, likeness stuff. You have to be able to start using that. They're already doing all that. There's probably 10 things that I could have named that they should have been doing that since Mike Elson has been hired as recruiting coordinator, they're doing.
Right.
So,
I agree.
That's the other thing. That answer would have been a lot longer 6 months ago.
And if we were having this conversation 6 months ago, the number one thing I would have said is getting the head coach more involved.
And that's another one. And I've been saying that for years, and it's true. And you have to hire more dynamic recruiters, and they've done that.
Right.
Look,
so I
don't know how much
stuff.
Right. I don't know how much of an improvement Marcus Freeman's going to be from a coach over Clark Lee. We'll find out. Right.
Right.
But he's already a much better improvement from a recruiting standpoint. That's an important thing.
No question.
So Yep. That's where I'm at.
I scrolled all the way down to kind of see where we were at, which we have a bunch, but I lost.
I got you. We'll get through some of these. Okay. Sean Higgins, how is the Xavier Nawamaka's visit go? It just started like a couple hours ago. It's way too early
going.
For that. Yeah, well, we'll talk about that on Monday. Big Betsy 21 says, any predictions for Tobias Merriweather? I don't have any predictions, but I think Notre Dame, look, here's what I said a month ago, and I still believe it today. If Tobias Merriweather makes a decision this summer, I feel really good about where Notre Dame stands. If he decides to wait till January, I'm going to get more nervous. And I've been pretty consistent with that, and his visit did nothing but solidify that. I think Notre Dame is in a good place. Tommy Leonard says, Brian, looking at this year's linebacker class and the class from 2018, how would you rank them 1 through 8? I'm assuming they land Junior and Snead. I'd have to think about that one, and I think I may do that here soon, because we were talking about this on the show the other night of those are the two best linebacker classes, 2018 and 2022. The difference is right now we're looking at the 2022 class as juniors, whereas that class was, they were seniors.
You're looking at them
as juniors, this class is going to be better. Because they're more advanced. But Shane Simon made a big jump as a senior. Jack Lamb made a big jump as a senior.
Sure.
And so that's the thing is like, how are these guys going to jump? So if it's already kind of close now, then I would think the 2022 class is going to be even better.
Right.
But I mean, I would look, Shane Simon and Jack Lamb are my 1-2 from that class. I think Josh Burnham and Jalen Snead would be if they get Jalen Snead, would be my 1-2 from this class. And that's I would take right now. I'd take that 2022 1-2 punch. You got a super chat down there, Vince?
Yep, I'm on it.
I'll be back on space.
Yep, I am on it. CW Pura? Yeah, I'm terrible at this. But thank you for the super chat. He says, thanks for all your hard work. Happy Father's Day to both you guys. borrow some of Vince's kids if you need to. I am all about donating. I will be
hard pass. Hard pass. This is my buddy from 757. This is my 757 brother right here. I'm not a dad of children, but we do have 2 dogs, and I'm a dog dad. So the backdrop of my computer screen is Rita and Sadie. So
there you go.
We always like to have a little bit of fun with that. So any excuse I can make to say, hey, honey, I need you to do this. It's Father's Day,
Right.
No, I have thought about borrowing some of my nieces and nephew around Father's Day because I have awesome nieces and a nephew. I have 3 nieces and a nephew, and they're. I actually thought about using one of the. They give me like these. One time I had it it said like it was a cup. I said other uncles, and it was like this is a stick figure dude. And then it was like me, and it was like it was like a stick figure with a cape on it. They're always getting me stuff like that. I love those kids.
That's great.
Yeah. All righty. Kevin Thomas, what causes a coordinator to fit a square peg into a round hole, i.e. Pagano, and how he tried to use Ejax versus Fangio and how successful he used Ejax? Look, what it boils down to is just stubbornness. Some guys are, this is my system, the system works, and this is what we're going to do. Right. I mean, that's what it boils down. It's stubbornness, but it's also philosophy. If your philosophy is this is what we do, then you're going to be stubborn about changing.
Correct.
If you're someone who's like, hey, this is our philosophy from an attacking thing, but we can be multiple and versatile with how we do that, then you're going to be able to get that going. Omar Austin, the linebacker class is really strong. Is it me or is the 2019 linebacker class in danger of getting passed over quickly? Yeah, I mean, it's a little early for that because these kids aren't on campus yet, and they're going to be seniors when this class is freshmen. But it's possible, sure. But I think part of that, too, is those kids are also missed a year of development because of COVID. They missed a lot of opportunities to develop. Right. So I think Marist and J.D. Bertrand and Osita, let's see where things are in a year from now and see if they've adjusted all. Larry Martin, I appreciate this. Best ND content, period. Thanks for all you do. And thank you for being a part of it, because otherwise it'd just be me and Vince talking to each other, and neither one of our wives would allow that.
No, they wouldn't.
So we appreciate it. Because of y'all, we can justify talking about Notre Dame football for 3 hours. Otherwise, it's like, seriously, grow up, get a life. That's what my wife would be telling me.
Yes.
All righty. Tommy Leonard, Matt D, yes, but I'm asking for individual ranking, not ranking them as a class, like if we were on this. I got that, Tommy, but for me, it's just I'd have to think about that. But I'll say is I would probably put Josh Burnham as a junior as my number 1 linebacker, and that might surprise some people because of how the Jalen Snead's ranking. I think Jalen Snead's an excellent player, but I think Josh Burnham, even as a top 100 recruit, is underrated.
Yeah,
I think he's a stud. See, Kevin Thomas bringing the questions today. If you have insight, how often does Notre Dame bring in former players during spring to help coach? Claypool came in and commented on what he had learned from the NFL. Why not bring him in to spread knowledge? Well, number one, a lot of times they're in minicamp and they're doing their own thing. But Notre Dame offensive line wise, this happens all the time. When Harry
there all the time,
he had Stanley, the Martins. I mean, Chris Watt. That's where Chris Watt really got his first coaching experience, was coming back doing camps for Harry Heastan when he was still playing and got done playing. I don't know if that's going to happen now, because obviously those guys didn't play for Harry Heastan. But like, I believe Q couples. No, actually, I don't think he was. No, it was the Martins and Stanley were at the last camps that they were at all the time. Okay. Those guys would come back and work with them. I'm trying to think. Because I think Q's first off season would have been last year, right? When there was no camps. I'd have to think about that. But no, maybe he had one. He had one summer.
Second. Yeah.
And if Harry was still here, Mike McGlinchey would be coming back. Know that Hainsey would be coming back. That Q would be coming back. All those guys. All righty. Lamont J, if Tyler Buckner starts next year, does Drew Pine transfer? I think he may eventually transfer, but I guarantee you Drew Pine's going to stay at Notre Dame until he gets a degree.
Yep, I agree as well.
Shocked
I
there.
Agree as well.
Somebody go ahead.
I was just going to say, somebody said something a few weeks ago maybe that they could see Drew Pine starting after Tyler Buckner left. Like, that's a possibility.
Yeah.
And from a math standpoint,
technically Drew is a freshman again.
Correct.
Because last year didn't count. Yes. It didn't even count as a redshirt. Just didn't count.
It didn't count at all.
So if Tyler Buckner's a 3-year player, if he's as good as we think, and he's a Justin Fields, Trevor Lawrence, then Drew Pine could stay and start for 2 years.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
So it's a very unique situation, but none of that's going to be determined until Drew Pine gets his degree. If you know that family at all, number one, you know that he is going to compete his butt off until there is no more time to compete. Yep. That's just how Drew Pine's wired. And that's how he was raised. All that kind of stuff.
Love it.
But also, he's going to get his degree from Notre Dame. I mean, Matthew last, Brian, do you have any bigger mugs? Not that we sell. The biggest that they offer was this 11 and 15. So I went with the bigger mug.
I have the one you had. Yeah, I think.
But the Irish Breakdown mugs, we don't have a bigger mug. All righty. Tommy Leonard asked, do we think Notre Dame is in better shape than previous thought with Nawamaka since they canceled the Martinez visit? Martinez is like a 5'10 corner. Xavier Nawamaka is a 6'2 safety. Those two things have nothing to do with each other. I would read more into where they stand with Benjamin Morrison and Devin Moore than anything else.
Yep.
Preston asks, what do you think about Notre Dame scheduling an official visit for offensive lineman Ashton Craig? Does this show Notre Dame thinks they will miss out on their top offensive line prospects? And what do you think about Ashton as a player? Preston, we talked about that a little bit earlier. We both like him. Vince just watched him for the first time during the show today. I saw him.
Impressed.
I had a buddy of mine sent me his film a week ago and said, hey, Notre Dame may look at this kid. And I liked his film. And he's a project, but he's the kind of
he's undersized.
He's that Joe Alt kind of guy, right? Like you give me that kind of long, powerful kid that just needs some time to fill out his weight. Give me a guy like that every year. Sure. I can live with that. I'm good with that because those guys can turn out. I mean, we've said this. Guys that go to Wisconsin and Iowa, you never heard them in high school.
Right.
You never hear them in their first 2-3 years, and all of a sudden you're like, where'd this all Big Ten kid come from? Never heard of him before.
Right, exactly.
Those are those kind of guys. So I would dig that. But it does show that they didn't close on Jake Taylor. They're not in good shape with Zach Rice. They're not going to get Zach Rice. I mean, it's just the odds are slim that they're going to get Zach Rice. They're not in a good place with their tackles. And so for the second year in a row, they had to go to plan B guys last year. They're going to have to, they missed out on, they didn't even have plan Bs the year before. They just toshed Baker and then they didn't take anybody else, and Michael Carmody, they're having to play Michael Carmody at tackle now because the tackle depth chart's already lacking numbers.
And it's not looking great
at the moment. And so, I mean, that's problematic. I mean, you can spin it however you want. And they've got the top end players they've got are really good. Tosh Baker, Blake Fisher, but the depth is concerning. Let's see here. This is back to the comment that Michael Collins made. Matthew Less says, Michael woke up today and chose violence with his comment about USC. It was savagery at its best.
It was fantastic.
Savagery at its best. And Preston says it's either 1,664 or 1,665 days since the last time USC beat Notre Dame. And because it was 2016 was the last time USC beat Notre Dame. Yes.
A long time.
Have they even had a single-digit game since then? They killed them in 2017. 2018, they ended up beating them by 14, right? Went at 24-10, 21-10, something like that. 2019, what was in 2019? It was a home. Oh, they ended up being a 10-point game, 10-point game then, but Notre Dame controlled the game. All righty, Matty K55. Yes, on Instagram today, a lot of Notre Dame players running out of the locker room for what I'm assuming is a lifting session, and they were screaming and yelling and going nuts. It looks so fun. Big dogs got to eat. Yeah, those things got to be. But you got to get mentally right to go through a Matt Bayless workout. You just can't show up and like, okay, ready to work out today. No, you will get destroyed if you show up with that kind of mentality when you're going into a Matt Bayless workout. Let's see here. Christopher says, come on, Chris, have some fun. As a Notre Dame fan, I don't think it's a good idea to taunt USC while they're down. They can recruit 5 stars almost like any other program. I remember Pete Carroll years when Notre Dame stood over success. Number 1, Tyrone Willingham and Bob Davie are not coaching at Notre Dame anymore. Number 2, come on, Chris, lighten up, buddy. It's a rivalry. We're having some fun.
Absolutely.
And, they had that one little period during Pete Carroll, but Lou Holtz dominated USC and Brian Kelly's done. Yeah. Every Notre Dame coach with a pulse has dominated USC in my lifetime. Okay. Yep. So let's just relax, man. We're having some fun here. All right, Jordan Schreiber. If Kyle Hamilton would have gone pro last year and gone top 10 in the first round, do you think Indy could have gotten a commitment from Kamara? No, because he's a safety and Kamara's a corner. But it's more about a pattern of developing it. And Matthew Romero has the one correction to Michael Collins' savage tweet. It's Southern Cal. That would have been the only thing that would have made it.
Because they hate being called that, and I love it.
Yeah.
Brent Byers I purposely call him that all the time. Brent Byers isn't what we're watching from Memorial like years old. He wasn't healthy last year, so that's not necessarily an accurate portrayal of his. Yeah, it is, because that's the most accurate portrayal of what he's done on the football field. Right. There was a little bit of junior film last year, not a ton. I watched a playoff game that he played in. It's not just the highlight film. Okay, I watched game film of him playing last year, I believe in the postseason. That's who he was. And camp stuff does not determine who you are as a football player, right? You have to show it on film. Exactly. I've seen you and I have both seen a lot of really good kids in shorts and helmets or whatever.
And that doesn't mean Amorian's not going to step up. It just means, as a general rule, Camp needs to confirm things that you've seen or that
Correct.
you need to see. It's not this guy stunk on film. Oh, gee, he's great now. Let's offer him.
Right.
A lot of the kids in Notre Dame has offered over the years based on what they did at camp have ended up not panning out when they got to Notre Dame. And a lot of them have transferred. I'm just saying.
Yep.
You got to think about that. Let's work through here. A lot of USC ripping, which is always fun.
Totally fine, by the way. We promote that.
Okay, here we go. Patrick McGrain, talking about linebackers. I was born in 1984, so a 90s kid. You poor thing. It means you didn't really experience you were young when, little younger than me when they had those great runs. Burt Berry, Keenan Tatum, and Corey Minor is my favorite linebacker core of all time. Low numbers, visors, and cowboy collars, baby. Yes, 100%. Yeah. I think that's why I love Jalen Smith and Manti so much, because they had those single-digit numbers. They were just monsters,
which
man.
Jalen's going back to, right?
Yes,
He's going back to number 9.
Love it. No, that Keenan Tatum was a thumper. But the thing is, too, is back then they were a 3-4 defense. So 2 of the guys you just mentioned were outside linebackers.
Right.
So you even had even more linebackers back. Wasn't Jimmy Friday part of that group too? I could be wrong on that, but I thought he was. I could be wrong. All right. Brian Demo says, if you guys have to be reserved in the press booth, you guys better bring it in the post-game show. Can't wait for the post-game show breakdown. Yeah, we've been talking a lot about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Yeah, I'm going to try to work through some of these questions because we're getting low on time. Vince is going to be out there soon, and my throat's about to die.
I was going to say, you got to be about
There's no way I'm going to be able to do this show. Brent Byer says this channel, IB in general, brings out the inner Notre Dame animal in me. That's awesome. So great to have a resource where I can consistently and openly discuss one of my greatest passions. Thank you, gentlemen. And that's why we do this, because we want you all to have a voice as well. And that's why we try to answer every single question. And today, for technical reasons, we're not going to be able to.
Right.
Patrick McGrain, is Jake Taylor uninterested due to Blake Fisher being in front of him and knowing he's going to have to wait a few years to play? They played 2 tackles, not just 1.
Well, and that's these high level guys are competitors. Like that's
you think he's just looking at Oklahoma's depth chart and like, no, those guys can play.
Yeah,
I mean their all lines every bit as good. It's look, Notre Dame's last 2 first round draft picks at left tackle started their career as a right tackle. Meaning starting games.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right.
It's not because of that. No, it's because Notre Dame didn't do as good of a job connecting with Jake Taylor. It's as simple as that. Revolver 6238, Bullet Bob Hayes was an Olympian for the Cowboys back in the day. That is correct. But again, that's the exception, not the rule. We've seen a lot of guys. Jonathan Wade recently is a guy in the last 10 years or so that was a world-class sprinter, went to Tennessee, didn't do anything. Preston says, late to the show, are you still confident that Billy Shrouth ends up at Notre Dame? I mean, I haven't heard anything that says to me otherwise. Brian Denbo. Brian, just so you know, my wife is getting the sound of your sweet voice on her birthday. That's awesome.
Well, happy birthday to your wife.
I hope she does not mad at me. But yes, if Mrs. Dembo is watching, Mrs. Dembo, have a wonderful birthday, and we hope that we could have made this fun for you.
Hopefully.
And if you have not enjoyed this, that just means you need to hold this over Brian's head and get something a little extra special out of your birthday for it.
No doubt.
That is what my wife would do. She's an Italian, so she knows how to game the system. Dynasty ISP. Look, I'm not trying to. What coach do you think will leave Notre Dame after the season for better or worse, i.e., promotion fired? I'm putting your question up because I don't want you to think we ignored you, but like I don't know how the season's going to go, and I don't really comment on that stuff anyway.
Stuff like that anyway.
You know, I mean, could I see someone trying to come after Mike Elston to be a head coach? Sure, but I mean, it would be something like that. If the season goes the way that I think it's going to go, I don't necessarily see anyone getting fired. And, hopefully that doesn't happen because that means Dell stepped up and got what he needed to do, get done, and all those other kind of things. And they've had a great year. Technical technician, happy Father's Day, gentlemen, all the way from Croatia on vacation. Wow. I wonder if you're out there. Are you out there for some soccer stuff? I know there's some soccer tournaments going on out that way too. Somebody else I know was at one of those recently. Christopher, who's better, Jack Cohn or Phil Dracovic? Phil Dracovic. No question. It's funny. Somebody was on Twitter yesterday. Oh, Phil Dracovic throws the ball in the ground. He's not any good. And I'm like, only Notre Dame fans think that. I mean, there's a reason you got people projecting to be a first or second round pick. The only people on the planet that don't think Phil Dracovic's really good are some Notre Dame fans. Now, some Notre Dame fans know he's good, and they're realistic, and they say, yeah, he's really good. Wish we had him. But then there's the others that just they can't wrap their head around that the coaching staff might have actually not gotten everything perfect. Might have been wrong about this one.
Right.
And Phil Dracovic stinks. He could go throw for 4,000 yards this year, lead BC to 11 wins, be a first-round pick. He's not that good. Whatever. Phil Dracovic's one of the 10 best quarterbacks in college football. And that's based on what he did last year, not even projecting what he did this year.
Right. With no, spring ball, with, all of that. And he did pretty decent when he was in college.
Yeah. This is a good question from Tyler. Does Bradshaw compare to Will Fuller at all, or completely different? Bradshaw, a more shake and short area quickness, and Fuller, more straight line speed. Yeah. If you want to compare him to a 2015 receiver, I think Amir Carlisle would be a better comparison. I think he's better than Amir was, but like that role, that quick game, catching things over the middle field seems
makes sense.
Amir was really good in the screen game, too. That would be from the 2015 receivers. He's more like Amir, a taller, better version, but more like Amir than how they would use Will Fuller. Matt D. C.J. Williams is a top 25, 26 overall player in the 2022 class. You definitely want him or Merriweather. You also need Bradshaw. I'd love to have all three.
Absolutely.
Yep, love to have all three. So looks like I got booted down. Oh, here we go. I'm trying to get these last questions in. Some of these are just repeats. Patrick McGrain with an interesting take. To be honest, I kind of like Pope's wide receiver tape better than Bradshaw. I'd like to get Pope and play him both ways. I disagree with that one. I think Jake Pope has good receiver film. I think Xavier Bradshaw has great receiver film. And most of his receiver film that you're looking at is sophomore film from Xavier Bradshaw. He has very, very little junior tape out there. Righty. Michael Anderson checking in from upstate South Carolina, but I am a transplant from South Bend. Why does it seem Clemson has a better track record of developing 3 and low 4-star players into more impactful players than Notre Dame? I don't agree with that premise, Michael, to be completely honest with you. I think Notre Dame's done a really good job of developing those kind of players.
I would say it appears that way because you're in South Carolina.
Well, no, I think it's like you look at the success that they're having, and I think it's I can understand where the premise comes from. I think it's a fair question. But I think if you look at a lot of Notre Dame's best players in recent years, they've been 3 and 4-star guys.
Right, exactly.
You say, well, look what they did with Isaiah Simmons. Okay, I'll see your Isaiah Simmons and check you with Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah, Right. Notre Dame's had plenty of those kind of guys.
I just don't think Notre Dame has gotten a lot of the hot.
That's been the difference.
That's the difference.
The difference between Notre Dame and Clemson has not been those guys. It's been Notre Dame had Ian Book and Clemson had Trevor Lawrence. Look, if you flip quarterbacks in 2018, Notre Dame wins that game by 17 points.
Yep.
At least.
Absolutely agree.
Same thing in 2015. If you, with all due respect to Sean Kaiser, if you trade quarterbacks in 2015, Notre Dame might actually win a championship in spite of Brian Van Gorder. Deshaun Kaiser was a good college quarterback. Deshaun Watson was a generational college quarterback.
Sure. And
then they followed him up with another generational quarterback 2 years later, which doesn't happen. The difference in 2018 was Trevor Lawrence. It was Justin Ross. It was Christian Wilkins. It was those highly ranked guys that were really the difference.
Yep.
But a lot of the best players for Notre Dame on those teams were guys that weren't highly ranked players, So to me, I think that's been the difference between Notre Dame and Clemson. It's those guys, not the 3-star guys. I think Notre Dame's done as good a job as anybody in developing the 3 and low 4-star players. They need to start landing more of the higher ceiling guys, whether they're 3 stars like Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah or 5 stars. I think that's the difference. Okay. Let's get to some. I'm gonna try to wrap it up here.
Yeah.
Joseph Barrett, I am not going to answer this question. I think this is a really good show. Vince, can you write this down real quick for a Football 101?
Yes.
Because we're going to start those Football 101s here soon, Joe, and I think that is a great one. Just from an alignment standpoint, from an assignment standpoint, from the skills you look for, I think it's a great question. So we're not going to answer that today because we have to wrap this up, and I'm running out of steam here. I'm not going to talk here until we do a show tomorrow. But that is an awesome question and a great idea for a show. So when we do that show, shout out to you because we're gonna do that show for you. I appreciate that very much. Okay. Matthew Romero trying to help me throw a little Jim Beam and honey in there. I got the honey. I don't drink alcohol, so I'm not gonna throw any Jim Beam in there. But, yeah, let's see here. Anna Guzman asks, wondering how it works regarding current Notre Dame players interacting with recruits. Are they each assigned one, or do they meet with their position group, keep in touch afterwards? A little bit of both. A little bit of both. Yeah, exactly, Vince. Exactly.
And it depends on how they get matched up. Is it a kid that went to their high school from their area? Is it a kid that went to their state? They look for some sort of a common denominator.
Personality fits. That's a big one too.
Absolutely.
Who's he going to be a lot like?
Because you could have a wide receiver hanging out with a defensive lineman if their personalities mesh. You know what I mean? So it is really important who they get paired up with, because those are the guys that they go off with, right? Away from the coaches and things like that. When you're
a lot of times you're going to hang out with that guy's friends too. too.
Exactly. Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and players don't normally just hang out. Other than offensive linemen, players don't tend to hang out with just their position groups.
That's a really good point,
guys from their class, guys from where they're from, things like that. So you'll get a little bit of that. You'll get that. You'll get a little bit of that. And I think they do a good job of really mixing it up. And that's important. You need these kids to meet as many people as possible. Now, if you have a star player, he may tend to kind of meet everybody, like a Trevor Lawrence or a Kyle Hamilton, kind of guy. All righty. Ryan M., some of the highly rated 2022 guys visiting this weekend are not Notre Dame locks by any means. Nawamaka, Moss, Singleton, Wagner, Hinsman. Confidence level of any of these guys landing in the class. I would say ranking my confidence level of those 5, I would go Hinsman, Nawamaka, Singleton, Moss, Wagner. Most confident to least confident. Okay. That's what I would be with those 5. Right, let's get to some more. Joe Stukenborg talking about Junior. Texas is pushing hard, but I'm hoping Freeman can close the deal. I think he's done a really good job. Bert Ferentz. Hey, fellas, if there was one spot still open for a position, would you rather take a player that isn't as talented but is versatile or take a more talented player locked into one spot? It'd depend on how big the talent difference is.
Right.
If it's a somewhat of a difference, Vince, I'm taking a more versatile player, but it also comes down to your positional needs. If that guy locked into one spot is a position where you're already strong and the versatile guy can kind of fill some holes where you're not as good, then you're going to go there too. That's why I say you can't just answer that
generational type talent kid that you're like, well, no matter what our class looks like.
Trevor Lawrence can only play quarterback. I'm still taking Trevor Lawrence.
Right.
There's always context needed.
Yeah, 100%.
Some years I may criticize them for taking a kid that another year I say you got to take that kid for. It just depends on what your needs are and those type of things. But and then Bird also says, Brian, hope you feel better, bro. Appreciate that.
How about this one? Brian, Vince, did you get Brian sick?
I don't think so. I'm not sick. I had a bad food experience that caused me to spend the night doing an activity that tends to destroy your throat. That is what's going on.
That is the vaguest but yet most obvious way of stating that. That was a word salad. I'm impressed. That was nice.
So I don't want to just say it. Some people may have, think I heard Brian Demos are great. Think I heard that Montana grandbaby is a silent commit. It's awesome. Jeffrey Rohrbacher says, Coach D being slowed by illness has been good for me. Trying to catch up on all this content. Promise this is not a criticism. Hope you feel better. That's actually, we didn't have a show yesterday, so I gave you a day to catch up. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that very much. Corey D says, getting Dallin Hayden, Sonny Styles, and Xavier Nwakpa would be huge, not just because they're great players, but because it would be great to stick to Ohio State. And that's a great point, Corey. If you want to close the gap at some point in time, you not just have to get good players, but you have to get players that they want, because now you're bringing them. It's not just about you coming up; it's about you beating them for them. Because then you can. That's the fastest way to speed up the gap is this right here, not just this. It's this, and when you take away some of the guys that they normally get, that's a big part of it, a real big part of it. Let's see here. Ronald made it late, but I made it. I will add this is most definitely the best PC, adds to my knowledge daily. I appreciate that very, very much. Very much. Jordan Schreiber says, is KJ Winston coming on an official visit this month too? My understanding is we have him down as listed for the next weekend, the 25th, the weekend of the 25th. Let's see here. We get some more questions. Brett Gallagher says, first time I went to was when Notre Dame lost to Navy for the first time in like 50 years. Wow, that was what, like 07, right? Or is that 08, 07?
It was in that neighborhood. Yeah.
I think it was 07.
Charlie.
Yeah, it was 07 because Charlie lost to him twice.
Yeah.
Lost him in 07 and 09, I believe.
Yeah.
Because then Kelly lost him in 2010. They lost the Navy like 3 out of 4 years.
Yeah, it was bad.
Just crazy. And haven't been back to watch a game since. Brett, that was not on you, buddy. That was not on you. No, Vince, don't be that guy. That was not on you. My first Notre Dame game was in 2007. It was the Notre Dame USC game. That was a bloodbath. My dad and I both went to our first.
That was your first one ever?
First one. Well, I mean, my Saturdays were usually preoccupied for much of my adult life.
Okay, good point.
I was kind of busy playing and coaching college football.
I keep forgetting.
Hey, Coach, I'm not going to be here this weekend. It's Notre Dame USC, so I got to go to the game. But I did go back to a game later that year with my wife, then girlfriend, now wife, Angela, went to the Duke game that year.
Okay.
And that was the second game. And then, of course, I didn't go to another game until I got covering the team, and now I go to a lot of them. So it was not you. It's not you, Brett. Don't listen to Vince. No, you should come back to a game. It's going to be a lot of fun. Nick Myers said, second row in the end zone against USC a couple years ago. We'll never forget the skirmish at halftime and the referee calling UCLA over the loudspeaker. That was awesome. I do remember that. You remember that, Vince, when he was UCLA? Yeah, it was great.
Well, yeah, because it's always the visitors referees. So he was, at one Pac-12 team's another, whatever.
Yeah, here. This is a great question. If Clark Lee does well at Vandy, would you rather have Freeman or Lee for the next head coach?
Ooh, I would rather have Freeman because he's
easy
a more
one
dynamic recruiter.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Jay says, Amorian Walker played a game and a half and had 3 TDs and an INT before he was injured as a junior. Wonder how productive he would have been if he played a full season. I'm pulling for the kid. Look, we're all pulling for the kid.
Absolutely.
I can't assume he would have done something else had he not been injured. I can go off of what I see. And what I see is a kid that's got some tools, but he's very raw and has a lot of work. And the speed that everyone claims he has doesn't show up on film yet. It may show up on film this year, right? But I don't know what else I can say about this. His film is what it is. I'm not going to judge off what a guy does in shorts. I hope Amorian comes out as a senior and blows up. It would not be the first time that I've had a kid rank low and he comes out as a senior and he blows up, right?
Sure.
There's been plenty of times it's going to happen. A kid is always going to have an opportunity for me to alter how I view him. It's happened a lot. One of these shows I may put a list together of guys that when Notre Dame first got him, I didn't like, but by the time they enrolled at Notre Dame, after seeing different things, I liked him a lot more. But right now we can only go off of what we've seen.
Sure.
And what we see on film is not impressive. Ronald says, my first game was Northwestern, my latest Duke. I would imagine that Ronald, was that back in like the 90s, or did you go like to a Northwestern game like even further back? Funny thing was I was right behind the team. Duke was actually ahead. I got PO'd and yelled, it's not Bama, it's Duke, for God's sake. Coach turned. That's awesome.
And Coach turned and smiled. We, of course, won because it was Dookie and we were at home.
I wonder if that was like the Duke game this year, if it was like I'm curious what year that was, because the last time they played Duke at home, they before this year, they got beat back in 2016. Matt D says if Freeman left, I think Mickens would leave to be Freeman's DC. I wouldn't assume that. I think Freeman might. It depends on, first of all, it depends on where Freeman goes.
Right.
If Freeman gets like the Virginia Tech job, do you want to be the D coordinator at Virginia Tech or do you want to be the D coordinator at Notre Dame?
Because I think he would. That's an open spot.
Yes, and I think Notre Dame would be interested in having him do that
to continue on with what they're doing. Yeah.
Rob Wicks asked, which running back out of the big three has the highest ceiling? That is Dallin Hayden, Nicholas Singleton, and Gavin Sawchuk. For me, the highest ceiling is Nicholas Singleton. I think he has the highest ceiling. Right now, my ranking is number 1, Dallin Hayden, number 2, Nicholas Singleton, number 3, Gavin Sawchuk. When it comes to ceiling, all I do is just flip 1 and 2. I think Singleton has a slightly higher ceiling than Hayden. Jim Masterson says, best indie show. No comparison. Thanks to Brian and his sidekick. Shots fired, Vince.
Wow.
Shots fired.
Well, that's fine. There's worse places to be.
Yeah.
I'm okay with
that. Joseph asked about the Herm. Brian, any thoughts on the Herm Edwards situation? Is it a tip of the iceberg scenario? I don't know enough about it, Vince. Have you paid attention to kind of what's going on?
Yeah, I read the articles that are out about him. It seems awfully shady. A lot of it points to Antonio Pierce kind of spearheading all of it because he's the defensive coordinator / recruiting coordinator / associate head coach /
right.
But it also, I mean, it implicates Herm meeting families in a back stairwell and thing. I mean, it's just it's not good. They were clearly thinking that they were going to get away with it, and it didn't really matter. And somebody blew the whistle on them. So. Wow. It's not a good situation. They were blatantly breaking the rules. Now,
interesting.
I didn't like the rules to begin with. It was just the non-visits, COVID, and everything. Right. I didn't like them, but they were still the rules, and everybody needs to follow them. And they were blatantly not following them. So,
Brent Byers, this is gonna be interesting. If Notre Dame finishes really strong on the recruiting trail this year, you're gonna create a Gap Close shirt. No, I will not. But here's my promise. If Notre Dame wins the national championship, I'll obviously be at the game. I will have a shirt that says Gap Closed. And after the game, the post-game show, I will rock that shirt.
Okay. Can I if you're at the national championship game, if I'm not sitting right next to you, we're going to have some issues. So
I mean, I'm sorry, dude. It just depends on if they only give us one spot, you're not taking it. I'm sorry.
No, they're going to give us 2,
okay,
and I will be there.
If they give us 2, of course you'll be there.
Okay, all right.
But
I get a shirt.
I want a shirt. If you want a Gap close shirt too, buddy. But look, because the Gap's not closed until you win the title, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, in all seriousness, the Gap's not closed, so you go out and win the title.
Could not agree more.
But I love where your head's at. But yes. You have my word. If Notre Dame wins the national title, the show we do immediately after that game, we will be rocking a Gap close shirt.
Yes,
100%, 100% guaranteed.
Awesome. I want
100% guaranteed. 100% guaranteed. Big Jim says, "Hope regarding Freeman's future. I just hope we get Bob Stoopsted and not Bob Davied." Here's the difference. Bob Stoops was a great D coordinator. Bob Davie wasn't. I mean, look, at the time I was in college at the time, and I knew that was a bad hire. You know, I mean, It wasn't a good hire. Bob Stoops was let's not forget, Bob Stoops had a national championship ring as an assistant coach. So no question. Righty. No games first, Freeman for president. Okay, gotcha.
I like the next one too.
John said, I have a brother named John as well. I was talking about your brother. I apologize, Christopher. I really do. Not the John Sally you're thinking of, though. Thanks, guys.
That's great. That's awesome. That's great.
Mike Padone says, I agree. This is in response to a question about games to go to.
Which game to go to? Yeah.
I agree with Brian. Went to the Notre Dame Navy game in San Diego. Great. It's always a great atmosphere, awesome, no matter where it is. It is a really awesome environment. It's a great game to go to. And if you're from a family that has a military family like I am, if you're someone who loves and respects the military, those games are great. Those games are always great. Corey D with a great comment. Brian Kelly's made the Notre Dame coaching job highly coveted again. 100% correct. Mm-hmm. Kelly has shown you can win big at Notre Dame when people in the past have questioned this. I believe Notre Dame can get almost anyone they want. I mean, they're not going to get Dabo. They're not going to get Saban, but I 100% agree with you. Brian Kelly has made this job a big-time job again. And so is Jack Swarbrick. Because, again, it's not just about winning and losing. It's about is the infrastructure in place to compete with anybody.
All of that stuff.
The combination of Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick. Yes. Yeah. Kelly has done what he needs to do on the field to make the program good enough to allow Jack Swarbrick to go get the money to make these changes. So absolutely agree with you 100%. Sky Shark 425, Jeff Burr's greatest Notre Dame goal line quarterback ever. Did they ever line him up a quarterback? I don't remember that. I remember they lined him up as one of that, like that full house backfield they did.
He was in a full house.
But I don't remember being a quarterback, but we're going to go with it. We're going to go with it. Tavis TB12 for 2022 starting quarterback. And if he does, great. All I've ever said is Drew Pine's not going to be easy to beat out. And if Tyler Buckner is a starting quarterback in 2022, it's because he's tapped into his full potential, because Drew Pine's not going to go away quietly. Let's see here. Tyler, would Notre Dame development be different if somehow Matt LaFleur was never discovered, the one that got – he wasn't the one that got away. He was here just as
be here in the first place.
He was here because he needed a job, and he was always looking towards the NFL. That's why he didn't recruit. That's why he didn't – I mean, he did not want to be here. There's no question about it. Tyler said Brady Quinn is the man, was in middle school when he was leading this team, shook his hand during the player walk, large human, and an awesome guy.
He does have large hands. I will give you that. Yes. He has very,
he's
very
a
large
great
hands.
Guy.
Yes.
But seriously, look into his third and goal foundation. Yeah. They do great work for veterans. Ronald says, is there anyone we are looking at in the Indy area? Let me know. I will go to a game and check them out. Haven't heard of any, so I will go watching the local channels. There's a couple 2023 kids. We'll get with you on that, Ronald. We should do some games. Do you think the Indy will have the majority of their 2022 class committed by the end of the summer? Yeah. I think they'll have at least 80% of their class done by the end of the summer. BRBRKRKR1. If the transfer plays, Kane Madden plays right guard and lug right tackle, thoughts on road graders on right side and more athletic players on the left side in terms of play calling. Yeah, there's something to that. I think there's a little something to that.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. I don't know what they're going to do on the offensive line. So, yes, anything is really possible at this point.
Brandon says, is the tailgate going to be BYOB? It will be. Vince and I had a talk about this the other day, and we will provide beverages, but they will be water and pop and stuff like that. If you want to bring alcohol to it, go for it. We're not going to have no problem with it, but we just don't drink alcohol. And there's other legal reasons why it would probably not be a good idea for us to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's a big one.
No, I mean, you want to bring it, we'll go for it. We'll provide food. We'll provide water. We'll provide pop, soda, whatever
if
it
we
is.
provide the alcohol and then you go streaking, that could be
going to the quad through the gymnasium.
Where'd
you get your alcohol? Freaking Driscoll and Irish Breakdown gave me like 47 Coors. No,
that could be bad for us. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
just saying.
Yeah. So there you go. He said I say free beer if you wear IB gear. See previous comment. The Trek reviewer. Hold on. I thought Blue Bloods was over. No, season's over, but it hasn't been canceled.
Over.
Yeah,
that is now.
The season is over. Yeah.
Yes, the season. But this next comment disturbs me in many ways.
Yeah, gonna have to get streaming service Paramount in order to watch the next season of SEAL Team. Unfortunately, it won't air on regular on CBS anymore. That's just ridiculous.
That's heartbreaking.
If that's true, I haven't heard that, but if that's true, that's gonna tick me off.
Yeah, that's gonna make
because I'm not gonna pay for that.
No,
it's ridiculous. Not for one show. KMA Preston, no names on jerseys can be useful. My number 12 and number 83 jersey started as Book, Claypool, and now it's Buckner and Jaden Thomas. Kevin Thomas, both QB School and Brett Coleman are NFL based. QB School breaks down the mechanics of QBs going to the NFL. Just send it to me. I mean, I'll check it out if it's good. I mean, I like watching smart people. Let's see here. Kevin Thomas says Chris Zorch also does podcasts. It'd be cool to see y'all link up. I'd love to have Chris on the show.
Oh, absolutely. He's a good interview. We've had him on our pregame show before.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show. I doubt he has any interest in coming on our show. I don't know Chris, whereas I know Ryan Harris. I know Oscar McBride. We're hoping to have on soon. We have a couple other former players I actually know that are going to come on, but I don't. Unfortunately, I don't know Chris Zorch. Never met him, but he seems like an awesome guy. Let's see here. Does Notre Dame have a dedicated scout for kids in the portal? And if they don't, should they get one? I don't know if they do or don't. And yes, they absolutely should have an analyst that part of his recruiting operation is just looking at kids in the portal. Liam Game, hit the like. John Long, love the shows. Thanks, guys. Thank you, John. Very, 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 very much. Christopher, I want a t-shirt that references underwhelming recruits that says gap literally wider than it has ever been. All hope is lost and God has forsaken us. You're in a cranky mood today, Chris. What's going on, man?
That's
jeez. Yeah, what's your deal, man? First, you're hating on the UFC thing. That's funny. It's savage. And then now this. Come on, buddy. Hey, I don't know what's going on, man. I'll pray for you if you need it, my man. But, sorry about that. Go order a pizza or something that makes you happy, my man.
Pizza, that sounds really good.
Yeah, it does sound good. Then I think I might go to Polito's tonight. John Lass says, how many recruits can we take in 2022? Right now, I think it's about 25. I think they could get a little bit past that, but it would require some serious roster manipulation for that. Yeah. Some guys that have to go. Tommy Leonard says, Brian, you can borrow my kids. I'm telling you, I have a 4-legged one and a 3-legged one. That's a story for another day.
That's true.
But I have enough of a handful.
My daughter absolutely adores.
She does. Well, how can you not love Sadie? She's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Let's see. Brian Demo, don't ever grow up. I did once and it was terrible. I agree 100%.
No doubt.
100%. And then Tommy says, he said, Brian, you can borrow my kids. No give backs. Gotta read the fine print. I gotta read the fine print. Let's see here. And in 2020, would you have preferred Book or Djokovic? I mean, I thought Djokovic should have replaced Book after the Michigan game in 2019, and they never should have looked back, but it is what it is. Jonathan says Jonathan has also bought some Irish Breakdown gear. And hey, if you've bought Irish Breakdown gear and you have a Twitter account, take a picture and send it to us. Like tag me in it. We'd love to see that stuff. That's awesome. My dad always told me that if you don't call USC Southern Cal, you're not a real Notre Dame fan. And I actually will put Southern Cal in articles. If you read the articles I write about USC the week of the game, I'm almost always calling them Southern
Every
Cal.
time I talk about them on the radio show, on this show, it's always
This is great. Mike Padone, my first Notre Dame game was against the baby Trojans in 1966. Notre Dame 51, USC nothing. That came a week after the Michigan State tie, 10-10. That solidified. That solidified Era's first national championship. That game, 51-0. Because any hope that people were thinking of, Notre Dame dropping after the 10-10 tie, that was gone. See, Matt Romero still calling me Matthew. Hey, your thing said Matthew, like your order thing said Matthew. Matt, I apologize. Liam's first game was in the 77 green jersey game. A lot of people's first game were against USC. Sat with my cousin, his roommate from Notre Dame, Jim Lynch, captain of the 66 Natty team. Jim Lynch is from Lima, where I was born. Felix Fournier, Jerkovic's a baller, better on game day than practice camp. 100% correct. Michael Anderson, thanks, guys. Appreciate the input and explanation. And it was a really good question, Michael. It really was. Yeah, it was good. Tommy Lawson, I'm from Tennessee, and we use moonshine and peppermint stick that will cure your throat.
Moonshine.
I appreciate that. I don't think we have any moonshine that I know of here in South Bend,
check
but
the bathtub upstairs.
Yeah. Searcher Green read between the lines about what made my voice go away. He got that one correct. Patrick McGrain, 92 was the first season I truly remember. Reggie Brooks was my hero. I met him at Maryland Shamrock game and dropped my plate of food in excitement. He's a really good guy, too. If you've ever met Reggie, I like Reggie a lot. Had a chance to sit down with him and Oscar one day. We were just talking about all types of things. Their stories that they have about their time at Notre Dame. Just so much fun.
Yep.
So much fun. Spartan B 88.
Job too.
Oh, yeah. Spartan B 88, November 4th, 2007. I was there, too. Losing the Navy for the first time in decades sucked. So that was earlier when somebody's talking about it. Righty. Joe says, can you explain why Harbaugh was so successful at Stanford and he's such a hot mess at Michigan? Believe me, I am happy about it. Just wondering. He wasn't a hot mess his first few years. I mean, Michigan got good his first 2 years. I mean, that's what people forget. I mean, Michigan, I think they win like 10 games or more in like
something like they were pretty good. I was
years.
Really nervous about that tenure.
I mean, 2018, if they beat Ohio State, they're in the college football playoff. I mean, they went 10-3 year one, 10-3 year two. Made it to the Citrus Bowl, Orange Bowl, Outback Bowl. They went 8-5, then back to 10-3. I mean, he's put some good teams his first couple of years. I just think there's something wrong with him. I'm not trying to be mean here. There's something wrong with him. Like you watch that guy talk, you look at the things he does. There's something wrong with him, and there's a lot going on in that program too. And I think the other thing too at Stanford is, I don't care how good of a head coach you are, you got to surround yourself with great coaches. And he had great coaches at Stanford. Great. I mean, Vic Fangio was his first defensive coordinator. Then he had like Derek Mason. I mean, he had great guys. And then, of course, he had David Shaw running his offense. If he had David Shaw running his offense now, they'd be a lot better. And that's not a Jim Harbaugh knock. That's true of anybody. Vince, you got to roll. I know you got to go pick up your son.
Yes, here. I got to pick him up.
We only got a couple questions left. I'll finish up here real quick. But
are you sure?
Thanks for being on the show.
I was trying to hold out till the end, but dad duties. So. Yeah. All right, guys. I will see you later. Hopefully we have a really good podcast tomorrow if we have one. So hoping. I'm trying to read between the lines, Brian.
Right. I got it.
All right, guys.
Picking up what I'm putting down. All right. Joe says, greatest game I went to was Notre Dame when Notre Dame beat UCLA. When during the game they announced that Stanford 40-point underdog beat USC. You should have heard the Rose Bowl crowd. So that was 2007. I remember that. And Stanford wasn't even good that year. That was a crazy upset. That was the beginning of the end for the Pete Carroll era there. Jeffrey Rohrbacher says, Joe, I was at that game too. Awesome. Yeah. I was 2007. I was living in, I think it was in Ohio at the time. Ronald says Northwestern 1965. I think Duke was 17. Okay. Not sure. I do hope I got whooping cough. I do know I got whooping cough. Whooping cough. Really, I thought that they went out like the 1800s. Nope. Still around, buddy. All righty. Last few questions. Tommy Lawson says, any chance of Urban Meyer taking over after Brian Kelly? I don't see that happening. I think the Urban Meyer had his chances to come to Notre Dame, and I don't think that happening. Jonathan says, when I was younger, I met a few Notre Dame players, and the one that always sticks out in my head was Brady Quinn. He was extremely rude, and it kind of ruined my view of Notre Dame at the time. Jonathan, I hate that you went through that, but that would be a very rare story. Most of the people that I hear that met Brady Quinn say he was a great guy. I don't know if maybe he was having a bad day or something, but that would be rare. And I had a chance to meet him recently, and he was a really, really good guy. Kevin Thomas says, if Pine starts in 22, does Tyler Buckner transfer? Look, guys, this isn't how it's going to be. Like, right, kids are not just going to always transfer as freshmen and sophomores the first time they get a shot, they don't play. That's just not going to happen. I know that everybody's worried about that because of the transfer portal, but that's just not how it's going to be. I mean, there's going to be guys that are going to be willing to stick it out. They're going to understand they're going to stay, especially at Notre Dame. I mean, every backup for every team is not going to just transfer and you're left with 40 guys, your starters and your freshmen. It's just not going to be that case. But he says, this situation not comparable to Jerkovic. Book got the nod over Jerk, which I feel would be easier to stomach as an underclassman than Pine getting it. But here's the deal. Phil Jerkovic did not transfer from Notre Dame because he wasn't starting. I said it at the time. It's true. I'm just telling you. I know the situation very, very well. He did not transfer because he wasn't going to start at Notre Dame. It was very clear to him that the Notre Dame coaches didn't want him here anymore. It wasn't about starting. He knew that if Ian Book came back in 2020, he was going to be done and Phil would have still 2 years to play. He knew that. And As it turned out, he would have had 3 years to play. He's only going to start for 2 years of BC probably before he goes to the NFL. Maybe he comes back for 5th year. But he didn't leave because Ian Book was still the starter. It was because it was very obvious based on public comments that were made about him by sources at Notre Dame, which is who? It's the coaching staff. It's people around Brian Kelly. The sabotage of his character that happened after the Michigan game when people like me were calling for him to start and all the stuff that was said about him publicly, about his work ethic and all these different things. If you read that about him and you know it's coming from coaches and the coaches are clearly not working with you, why would you stay? Whether you think you're going to ever start again. And then, of course, the same sources were talking about how Tyler Buckner was going to start as a true freshman. So if you're Phil Jurkovec, I mean, could you have made it any more clear that you don't want me here? And that's why he left. It had nothing to do with him not being a starter. And so it is a completely different situation than what's happening, as we know, of just getting beat out by Drew Pine. But I don't see Tyler Buckner transferring. Tommy Leonard says, I was at the 07 senior day game against Army. It was also really awesome. Yeah. I mean, those are Army. I haven't been to an Army game at Notre Dame. The Air Force game at 2011 was pretty cool. All righty. Let's get to these last couple questions and I got to get going. Let's see here. Get him rocks as ran track at Notre Dame and Reggie was an administrator for us. I'm friends with him on Facebook. That's pretty cool. All righty. Michael Moore says, Brian, I love when you're on Mark Rogers' show. He looks at you like, wow, it's awesome. I didn't notice that, but I really appreciate it. So, and we're going to wrap up with D-Rock's comment. Great show. Enough said. Go Irish. So what D-Rock is telling you is before you leave, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and then hit the notifications bell as well. That's the important part because that'll tell you when we have a sudden show where we schedule a show, like let's just say tomorrow, sometime if something happens tomorrow and then we have to say, hey, there's news breaking. And so we've got to schedule a show. We're going to schedule about 30 minutes out. You're going to get a notification saying that we've got a live show coming and pretty soon. And it's going to tell you what the show's about. You want to check it out. So that's why you need to make sure that you, hit the notification bell as well. Make sure you're checking out irishbreakdown.com. Our link to our merch stores down there, our free newsletters down there. If you're listening to this on podcast and not the YouTube channel, please give us a 5-star grade there. It helps us expand our reach there as well, which is sort of similar to what hitting the like button and things like that does for our podcast on YouTube. So appreciate y'all dealing with my voice today. I'm hoping that it'll be back better tomorrow. I'm way better than it was yesterday. And then, of course, by Monday, when we have our Monday show, and hopefully we'll be able to wrap up the recruiting weekend. Just depends on how much intel we can get. Maybe it'll be Tuesday. Just depends on how much intel I can get. So I thank y'all so much for spending your Friday with us. We had some good times today. We'll be back again hopefully tomorrow for another show. And we'll definitely be back with you again on Monday. So everybody have a great weekend. If you're a father, happy Father's Day to you. Happy Father's Day to Notre Dame for being USC's daddy. I love that from Michael Collins. But everybody have a safe weekend. Enjoy your time with your family. And we'll talk to you all again very, very soon.